Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Cambria Community Service District to order. If everyone would rise and recite the pledge with me. Thank you. Let the records show that we have a quorum present, and we have no report from closed session. Before we go further, I would like to just advise everyone that we were informed this morning that Supervisor Paul Teixeira of the 4th District, I believe, passed away at age 57, which is a real shocker. So if we could have a moment of silence, please, in memory of it. Thank you very much. And Mr. Gruber, if you could send condolences to his family, that would be appreciated on behalf of the board. Special reports, Sheriff's Department.
Thank you, Mr. President, Board. For the month of May 2013, we had a fairly consistent number of calls for service that we had in April, with 281 calls for service. 51 of those were emergency medical calls, 32 assist other agencies. We had 3 crimes against persons, 2 batteries, and 1 criminal threats. We had no domestic violence in the month of May. Crimes against property were up from April. In April we had 12. We had 19 in May. Burglaries remained consistent with 4 reported for the month. However, thefts went from 5 in April to 10 in May. Vandalisms, we had 2 in April, 3 in May, and trespassing, we had 1 in April, 2 in May. So crimes against property has been our trending up area that we're looking at and trying to figure out strategies to any kind of patterns and things like that we can maybe get those trending back down. We had 10 disturbances, 19 check the welfare or citizen assist, 12 suspicious circumstances or suspicious subjects, 35 incomplete 911 calls, 19 alarm calls, and 62 total self-initiated field activity, including 41 traffic or pedestrian stops and 21 either on-site or flag down type calls. For the month of May, we had 1 drunken public report, which was consistent with April. This afternoon, a group of school-age children are culminating a summer camp put on by our school resource unit called the Great Camp, Gang Resistance and Education Training. That camp has served the school children from Coast Union School District and Cayucos School District, and it's being held at the Cayucos School and culminates this afternoon. So they've had a 4-day experience learning skills to avoid becoming involved in gangs and sort of a proactive approach to try and reduce the chance of those kids going on to criminality as they grow.
Thank you, Sergeant. I did have the opportunity, and along with my wife, to participate in that summer camp for several days this week, and it's very well done. No cost whatsoever to the participants. I think there's some 40 school children from our grammar school, and another 7 from San Simeon that attend Coast Grammar School. And again, lunches are provided, transportation, a very good curriculum, and the kids really seem to be having a great time. So thank you, and thank the sheriff for putting this on, and I'm sure the parents of the kids really appreciate it too.
Thank you.
Any other comments from members?
I have a question on the thefts and burglaries. Are they kind of general area, or are they located, or commercial as compared to residential?
They're inconsistent and kind of spread throughout the community, so it makes it more difficult for us to target with a specific strategy.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
I don't see Captain Bitto in the room. Mr. Gruber?
They had an emergency, and I passed him, and he told me that he wouldn't be able to make it, so I'll give a brief fire department report if you'd like me to.
When we get to your manager's report,
Okay.
that'd be fine.
Thank you.
We don't want to keep Linda Finley waiting anymore. She's been waiting around for a month, and so Linda, we thank you for returning today and bringing with you members of the Cambria Tourist Board. If you would be so kind as to take the podium and perhaps introduce the members that are with you here, and it's all yours.
Thank you very much for letting us come back. And we do have some of our board members here today, and I'm happy to introduce them to you. I'll start with our chair, Bram Winter. He's the general manager of the lodge, Cambria Pines Lodge. Next to him is Ken Cooper. He owns the Bluebird Inn down on Main Street. Next to Ken is our esteemed administrator, Julia Mitchell. She keeps us all together. And next to Julia is Victoria Moreno, and she owns Victoria's Last Resort on Ledge Hill. It's a bed and breakfast. We're missing today because of work responsibilities Nancy Carr, who works up on Moonstone Beach Drive, and Deborah Scarborough, who owns the Black Cat, and then myself. And I think that's everybody.
Great. Well,
So,
thank you all for coming, and take it away, Linda, with your presentation.
okay. I think our little presentation should answer most of your questions. If you do have any questions, I'd be happy, or one of the members would be happy to answer. So it's just a short PowerPoint presentation. There you go. Okay. Basically, I'm just going to read through it. It's pretty self-explanatory. We're introducing you to the Cambria Tourism Board. The Tourism Board, the CTB, is a board of Cambria volunteers from the hospitality industry, including hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, and local business owners. Who we are. There we go. We are one of the local fund boards of the SLO County Business Improvement District, which we call the CBID. We meet monthly every second Tuesday at 1 p.m. at the Cambria Pines Lodge. The public is welcome and encouraged to attend our meetings. How we exist. SLO County Lodgings collects and pay a monthly transient occupancy tax, a bed tax, it's also called a TOT, on behalf of the San Luis Obispo County tax collector in the amount of 9%. In 2009, an additional 2% assessment fee was voted and approved by the lodging owners in the unincorporated areas of SLO County. These areas include Avila Beach, Cambria, Cayucas, Los Osos Bay Wood Park, the unincorporated portion of Morro Bay, Oceano, Napomo, San Simeon Ragged Point, and Edna Valley and Arroyo Grande Valley. The SLO County Business Improvement District receives 1% of the 2% assessment to promote tourism for the entire CBID region. Each of the other unincorporated areas receives the remaining 1% collected from their assessment. Cambria's 1% is managed by the Cambria Tourism Board. Our defining focus. Our mission is, the mission of the CBID, which the CTB shares, is to improve the economic well-being of our constituents, hotels, motels, B&Bs, and vacation rentals. We serve the lodging industry exclusively, but understand that as we see increase in lodging business, other businesses and community will also benefit. Getting more specific, our goals for Cambria are to create special events and sustainable activities that will promote the natural habitat and surrounding beauty of Cambria. Increase tourism during the shoulder seasons, increase length of stays in Cambria, increase midweek stays. Steps to reaching our goal, including our objectives. Work with the local nonprofit organizations and businesses to create programs and events that will bring visitors to stay in Cambria lodging facilities. Focus these programs and events to occur during the slowest business months of the year, being September 15th through June 15th, excluding holiday times. Whenever possible, make certain these programs, events, and activities include an element of sustainability of culture, history, environment, or atmosphere for Cambria. Our task is twofold, a blended objective. Cambria is one of the few untouched areas of the Central Coast. As a result, it is also a very desirable tourist destination. As a tourism board, it is our task to bring greater awareness of Cambria as a tourism destination, while at the same time preserving the pristine quality of Cambria that blesses its residents and remains the drawing card to our visitors. Looking to our future, a new view of tourism. We know there has been a long-time conflict in Cambria between increased tourism and maintaining our pristine environment. What if we were to develop, with your help, a program that could accomplish both things at the same time? We have plans to do just that. Here is how it could work. Planning a new approach. Who is a stewardship traveler? Together with your input and development, the Cambria Tourism Board is adopting an up-and-coming approach to tourism called stewardship traveler. Stewardship travel is becoming known in small pockets globally, but the CBID is one of the first to develop it in an entire region. The benefit of promoting stewardship travel is that it will draw visitors to our community who want to invest time and energy and even financial resources to helping our efforts at sustaining our pristine natural environment. Who is a stewardship traveler? A stewardship traveler is a person whose travel focus includes letting their interests, awareness, and values drive their travel plans. Enjoy the enriching and authentic connections to local people, nature, and places. Opportunities to learn about the community where they travel. Making a difference while on vacation. This is our new logo that you'll be seeing more and more of all throughout our Central Coast region, which encompasses the general area of the unincorporated areas of our district that we represent through the CBID. And if you can read it, I'll read it to you because it is a little hard to read in the middle. Let your interests, awareness, and values drive your explorations and play. And then that moves into enjoying enriching and authentic connections to local people, nature, and places. Dive into greater opportunities for learning about what interests and matters to you most. And make a difference while on vacation, many volunteer and/or donation experiences. And so, it's okay, no, it's fine. It kind of repeats. What is the Stewardship Traveler Program? In order for a program to qualify as a Stewardship Traveler Program, it must include these criteria. There are three: educational programs, activities, and/or events. Increased value through a deeper connection, and opportunities to give something back to your community. The Wine Coast Country region. the discovery route, and the stewardship travel. The CBID, in their efforts to promote the county through marketing the unincorporated region, has created the Wine Coast Country Discovery Route. This is a 101-mile drive through all of the unincorporated areas, including Cambria. Each community has developed activities that are unique to their area in which travelers may choose to participate. Many of these activities are stewardship traveler focused. And this is a map that indicates the 101-mile route through the unincorporated areas. It starts at either end, but it includes Ragged Point and through San Simeon, Cambria, Cayucas, Morro Bay, Los Osos, down south through New Pomo, and then it winds back inland through Arroyo Grande and ends in Edna Valley. And all of these areas, each area has their own CBID or board, like our Cambria board. Each one of these areas has their own board, and all of us over the last several months have been working hard to create destinations that satisfy this stewardship traveler program. They are all starting, they will be launching in the beginning of August publicly on the Wine Coast Country website, which is the big mother website for the CBID. All of our individual areas have their own websites if they choose to, and their own marketing, but the big one is winecoastcountry.com. So after August 1st, you will be able to see, there are already some on there, but the official launch will be on August 1st. Making a difference together. Join each other to make a greater impact. We want to encourage all Cambria nonprofits and businesses to join each other as a team in creating events, activities, and improving infrastructure, making Cambria an even more aesthetically appealing destination for travelers. We also want all of your participation together to get the word out to the public, giving a more far-reaching impact than one nonprofit can do on its own. The CTB is an umbrella that can gather ideas and disperse information through the community, as well as provide some financial assistance and make these objectives come to fruition. The first steps to being funded. Bring us your ideas. The first step will be to contact our managing assistant, Julia Mitchell. At this, we can provide you with the contact information if you don't have something to write with, either by email or by her phone. She will provide you an application for funding. This application is also available on the Wine Coast Country website under members. You contact the lower end of the homepage on the website, and you can get to all the information about all the bids on the members tab. She will review your completed application with you to be certain it will meet all the requirements for approval. The next steps we will take. Your application will be presented to the appropriate committee where it will be determined if it will fit in with the mission as well as the CTB business plan and budget. I am the head of the outreach committee. Ken Cooper is the head of the events committee, and Victoria is the head of our marketing committee, and we also have a governance committee that includes Bram and Nancy Carr. So the main ones that you would be contacting would be either outreach or events, if you have something that you want to seek approval for. If approved, your application will be sent to the CTB for their review and discussion on the second Tuesday of the month following approval. When approved by the board, it is sent to the CBID for approval of funds. This entire process can take up to 6 months. Exceptions to funding. What we cannot fund: programs, events, or activities that exhibit no evidence that the designated project will bring business to our lodging constituents. We are not able to fund anything during holidays or in high season during the summer months. Anything that does not directly stimulate lodging business. How we can help you. We exist so that you can make a difference. We can help you fine-tune your ideas to fit within our mission and goals. We can help with your application to give you the best possibility of success in receiving financial assistance from us. We will support your event program through posting on our Facebook, website, and other social media. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Linda, could you perhaps give us an example of some of the things that have been funded? I know there's
The Scarecrow Festival is a big one. They came to us last year. They are in technically our off-season, though October is continuing to be a bigger and better month for the town of Cambria. We have helped support their advertising, their different needs, and they've come to us again this year, so we have funded that. Correct. The Stuart Stolo Winery, the new winery out on Santa Rosa Creek Road, has agreed to be a part of the Stewardship Traveler Program, so they will be indicated on the map that we showed you, the 101-mile map. And they are offering people to come out there and learn about wine production, how they produce. They are a locally sustainable winery, and so they will educate people about that factor in their wine business, and then give them the opportunity to do tastings and comparisons of the different wines that they produce. So that's a perfect example of a business that is willing and able to participate in a program like this, and then any funds that they receive from that program is being donated back to the Historical Society. So it's a win-win partnership for both.
I know not a funded program, but I recall several years ago, or the last couple of years, where at the Fiscalini Ranch, there are persons that actually vacation in Cambria that come here for a month and help to clear the invasive plants from the ranch.
Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch is like the poster child for a Stewardship Traveler Program. They already have in place doing exactly what our mission is to promote the stewardship travel concept. They're already doing it. So, yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
Directors, any?
I just wanted to chime in on that, in particular with the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve. It is really amazing how people look forward to coming from Oregon, coming from out of state, and they just go to work on the ranch. And, that's just, it's a great example of how people are really joining the community as volunteers and really feeling more not like a visitor, but like they belong here for the time they're here.
Exactly. So we're here, obviously, to teach you a bit about the CTB and then our new emphasis on this new concept of the Stewardship Traveler, and just to hopefully open up your minds about opportunities in town, and also, the audience of locations in town or nonprofits that can partner together and create events that will fall into this category.
I just found it very, very helpful and enlightening, because I've heard of the tourism board for a long time, but it's really nice to actually know that and have the information. How many wine stops or whatever, wine stops I suppose, in Cambria, how many sites do we have that are included?
I think Stolo is the only one so far.
The wineries, the local wineries have developed the Pacific Coast Wine Trail. There are 7 wineries involved, including Harmony, Cayucas, First Ranch, Black Hand Cellars, Twin. Lordy, this is the part I was avoiding. Okay, there are 7 wineries, including Black Hand Cellars, Stolo, Twin Coyotes, Hearst Ranch Winery, Cayucas, and Harmony, and I'm missing one.
And Moonstone Cellars.
Moonstone Cellars, yes. So that's another loop on the Discovery Route. Each community is doing their own little small loops, and the Pacific Coast Wine Trail is one of ours. So yes, we are promoting the local wineries that way.
It would seem like a good board field trip.
Yay.
Yeah, you'll have a hard time convincing us to go on that one.
Thank you.
Director
Okay.
Berger?
Yeah, I kind of had a question. I am assuming that of the 1%, you're sharing 1% of the total tax.
Correct.
Essentially 1% of the tax you collect
Correct.
to the main group, and then we have, or the local group has 1%, and that's pro rata. In other words, the more the more tax here is the more amount of money that you have in the budget?
Exactly. The more rooms that are rented, the bigger the income is.
Do you have a feel for Cambria's relationship to the other areas? Are
We
we?
far and away have the largest fund of any of the other boards,
Cool. Very good.
just because the number of hotels, B&Bs, and
Good.
motels.
And I know this TOT is specifically earmarked to come back to Cambria, and I think it's, we've seen so much TOT not come back here.
Yes.
That,
That's basically why this was started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
And it's a sizable amount of money, and we want to share it. It's a great opportunity for a lot of nonprofits and businesses to utilize the funds that are available.
we appreciate that, and hopefully there will be an outpouring of applications based upon your presentation today.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
we thank you for being here and sharing your information, and we thank your board for joining you in support and for the work you do. Very
Well,
good.
thank you for the opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the agenda further. Public comment. We have no cards. Okay. Oh. Could you, okay, could you speak and then fill out a card and give it to our clerk, please? Certainly, and identify yourself.
I'd be delighted. I'm Jeff Walters. I live on Happy Hill, so where am I? Speaking over this. There we go.
Is it on?
Kind of.
Okay.
Anyway, I was just told of the meeting just shortly a little while ago. And what I wanted to speak on was really more of the water issues that are going on in the town here, and basically, I also know that you were supposedly going to be addressing some of those water issues today, as far as regards to people on the wait list, et cetera. My feeling is that considering what we're going through as far as drought conditions this year and likely to be a trend in coming years, based upon climate change, whether anybody believes in that or not, which I think is kind of ridiculous that anybody wouldn't. But based on climate change conditions projected out, going on from now on out, we're experiencing actually not an anomaly, but more of a trend. And as a trend, and considering the fact that the creek behind us right now, which is not usually this dry by this time of the year, is already dry. And you can just go ahead and look at that yourselves, so that can be visually recorded. That's likely to continue, and it's likely to continue for the foreseeable future. Things are going to get drier. I'm not sure if you're all aware of the Tribune articles that have been going out in the last week. There's a four-issue article on water usage in Paso Robles, and how their water table they figured was essentially unlimited up until basically this year for the most part, and they've decided that most of the wineries actually in the area, in fact all of the wineries in the area have had to dig deeper wells because their water table is shrinking, which is actually being recorded from space. There is actually a way of recording that. It's a system called GRACE that actually tracks the density of the Earth and gravitational force. And by so doing that, they can also track the water table because of density. Density, of course, when there's an aquifer underneath the ground, is lower, and they can track that. The aquifer in the Paso Robles area has actually receded by, as far as I remember, something of close to 60%. That should be alarming to anybody here on the board as far as the future for Cambria water, which is also decreasing, like I said, in mentioning the creek and the fact that it's dried up right now, which is a little early, if not unusual, because as far as I know, that creek usually has water in it at least year-round of some kind. The fact that it is now dry is extremely frightening. And like I said, it's not necessarily an anomaly. It's more likely to be a trend based upon most of the overview of how the science works and how our climate is changing across the globe. We are certainly no stranger to that here in Cambria, especially considering water issues have always been an issue here in Cambria as far as its use, how much we actually have. We don't have a snowpack to maintain our water with, and what we get as far as rainfall, we get wonderful and considerable moisture generally here in Cambria, but throughout the rest of the year, it doesn't always maintain. And certainly this year, it has been drier than any year, certainly that I have known of, and I've been coming here since 1983. And I have never seen it this dry in Cambria, ever. Nor have I ever experienced what we experienced last year with the heat wave that we had that was pretty amazing in October, which is also unusual. But the climate change models actually reflect that. The strange swings in weather actually are part of the model. So seeing heat in that time is kind of the thing.
Okay, Mr. Walters, if you could
Yes,
complete
wrap
your
it up.
remarks.
Sure, that's it. I really wanted to say that as a consideration for any water use permits that might be issued, and I just wanted to address that issue. Also, the issue of fracking, which I'll get into later, the later commentary.
Thank you, sir. And if you could fill out one of the cards in the hall and give it to Ms. Cho, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving to agenda review, additions, deletions, and pulled consent items. Members, anything you wish to remove from the consent calendar?
I think you missed the manager's report, but as long as we're on the subject, I'd like to just note that any vote I have on the consent agenda will not consider item 7D. That property is too close to me, and I'm going to recuse myself on that one.
I would like to pull item F from consent.
Okay, any others, members? All right. Item F will be considered separately. Going to agenda item 6 now, manager's report. Mr. Gruber.
Thank you, President Thompson and board members. AGP, can we go ahead and do that video, that PowerPoint that I have on the facilities and resources? This is our second PowerPoint presentation in a series of 3, but really they'll actually be ongoing. Next month we'll do the water department and the improvements that have been made to the distribution system and the supply side of things. And so a couple months ago, I talked about the wastewater side of things, and due to technical difficulties, we didn't show the facilities. These are ongoing. There's several things that have been done since this, to include the work that's been done out front in the Veterans Hall here, the landscaping. Just for that landscaping is a drip irrigation, and whatever water that does use, we'll offset it by some retrofits here in this facility. So we don't want people to think that we're not being water-wise, so we'll do that. Also, the foyer, if you notice in here, if you walked in here, you probably didn't notice, but there used to be some old wallpaper in here that we've taken down in the foyer, and we've retextured the walls as you walk in, and then there'll be additional lighting put out here that'll actually shine on the flag and the plaque that's been out there. So aesthetically, since we rent this facility to the public now, it's going to look a lot nicer when you walk in, and I think that we really need to continue to maintain this facility and make improvements to it for a whole bunch of different reasons. So let me just go through this really quick. Again, this is part 2 of a 3-part series, but pretty much every month I'll be showing you at least a couple slides on some of the things that we're doing. This is repairing and opening the skate park. A lot of major work that went on there, and that was on the right there is the finish. They call that the big ramp, so that's what it looked like when it was done. A lot of wood rot had to go below that ramp and actually go to the infrastructure part of it, the supporting beams and things like that, or replace that. So it is being used extensively, and for the most part, everybody wears helmets. Every once in a while, you get somebody in there that doesn't, but overwhelmingly, it's become a family-oriented type environment where you see people traveling through town, and they'll stop there and use it. So it's really, on any given day, you'll see anywhere from a few people over there to 15 or 20 people. So it's turned out to be a really good really good asset for the community. Next slide, please. This is the erosion control project on the Fiscalini Ranch. So to familiarize yourself with this, if you go over to Seacliff Estates, right down from Park Hill, that's the erosion control project that happened over there. It's taking really nicely. The seed that has been planted. We do have a responsibility for 5 years as part of the grant funding for this to make sure that the vegetation is established. So it's turned out really nice. Next slide, please. This is the Moonstone Connector Trail. This was the trail that was connects Windsor to that hotel right there, and this was a long time coming. It was a lot of work, a lot of effort. Really, it originated from safety concerns for people walking. Once you left that area right there where those rocks were, there was really nowhere to go except the road. So it does need to be continued on and incorporated into the beginning of the Moonstone Trail, and that's one of the goals that the pros identified. So we'll hopefully be working on that this year, at least getting it started. But the 3Cs did a really good job on that. Next slide, please. This is the Vets Hall, this building right here. We're repainting the front of the Vets Hall, which needs to be done every couple of years. And then we put a new fire suppression system in the kitchen, replace that. Next slide, please. The expansion of the flagpole memorial and installation of the Lucky Flag. So on the left there, you see the Lucky Flag and that old wallpaper. That old wallpaper has now all been taken down, and the walls retextured and painted, and then the can lights that are in there right now will be replaced with a nice track lighting, so it'll show on there and just make the building more, make it look a little bit nicer. Next slide. This is the annual weed abatement process. This is just a designated trail, and that's what it looked like before and after, and it's an ongoing. I'm not sure exactly where that is, but that's what the annual weed abatement process looks like, and that falls on the property that we own under Carlos's department. The property that we don't own falls under fire department's responsibility. Next slide. The banner and decoration policy that the board adopted and the installation of additional banner arms, those are what they look like. The board authorized about $9,000, and it's been a real success. They look nice. The banners that you hang up have to be a certain size or they won't fit on the brackets. And so that's turned out really nice. They're up for the Scarecrow Festival and things like that. So next slide. Remodeling of the west public restroom, and we'll be doing the east one this year as part of the budget, but that was redone, and it turned out really nice. So one down, one to go. Next slide. Repair the water yard offices. If you ever get a chance, I was over there yesterday, so the water department moved over to the wastewater plant. It's kind of our utilities operations center. That's worked out really well. And the facilities and resource department moved over to the old water yard. Well, they're all very handy, and that room on the left that floor has been taken up and a new floor put it down. So both those offices are done, but there's also a kitchen in the back that the guys gutted and are in the process of redoing it. It's all being done in-house for a really reasonable amount of money. We don't have additional slides, but outside that water yard over in the East Ranch, they've just cleaned up the whole outside of it and have dumped about 2 20-yard dumpsters full of junk, so it looks a lot nicer. And that's where the facilities and resources. So the rodeo grounds improvement, that's a month or so ago, the board asked that the county, that we don't renew that contract with the county, the agreement for them to park there, so they in a timely manner, we appreciate it. They've gotten their stuff out of there. That's what it looks like now. Those pylons back over there have been moved, or are going to be moved down to the water yard, and will continue to. Behind those pylons are more piles of asphalt and dirt and everything like that, and so we'll be knocking that down and cleaning it up. And on the picture on the right, you see a little bit of the blue tank. Well, that whole area has been cleaned up, and those weeds have been knocked down, so it looks a lot nicer. I think that's next slide. That's it. So that's the facilities and resources department, and then next month we'll do the water department, other than the SR4 well, because I've pretty much covered that. For time reasons, on page 7 through page 9 is my manager's report. I'll go back and answer any questions. I think I covered pretty much everything in pretty good detail. Next month, we plan on bringing back the final copy of the administrative policy and the changes to the municipal code, specifically relating to intent to serve letters. So that was the result of the Friday workshop. We'll be bringing that back. In July, I'll be bringing connection fees to the board, and so those are what's on the plate for next month. On page 10 in the reserves, we have $4.69 million. Let me just kind of work through this. Fire department on page 14 and page 15 and page 16, you can see in May that they responded to 64 calls, 30 of which were medical, 1 was vehicle, 4 were fire, hazardous situations, 15 were public service assist, 11 were false alarms, 1 was a mutual aid, 1 was a 2 were an auto, for a total of 64. For lucky, we haven't had any fires, as you can see, in March, April, and May. So that's good. I'm happy to hear that. So Mark is back from vacation. He had taken a couple weeks vacation, but he's back. I just got an email from him. On page 17 is the district engineer's report. He is on vacation, and so is Monique Madrid, our administrative services officer. So I'm kind of filling in for Bob. What we are moving forward on again is the connection fees that we brought back to the board next month, and then hopefully the work that we're doing with Bill Madaus is pretty much finished up. I've asked him to be on a conference call with us next month. We have put a timeline in, and actually, it's thanks to Kathy, it's bigger so you can read it. It's the Army Corps, and this is the size we'll put in here from this point forward. We found out how to make it bigger so you can actually read it. I have not been in contact with the Army Corps very much lately. So the water department, you have a water utilities manager report. What we've done is combine just the water and wastewater reports into one utility manager's report. On page 21, we have information relating to the wells, and we have on 22 Carlos's report. On page 23, we have Monique's report, administrative officer report. Our total points bank right now is 7,155 points. I know I covered this really quickly, but it's a big agenda, and I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at it. But if there's any questions that I can answer about my report or any of the attached information, I'll be more than happy to at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Gruber. Members, any comments or questions for the general manager? Director Clift?
I just wanted to point out that on the report on the Army Corps of Engineers that it looks like here we're talking about 1,148 days to do an EIR.
Sure.
And if I would remember back right, the contract with the people doing EIR, if you take their average billing rate and divide that into the about $300,000, you know, the time to do it is probably less than 60 days.
Should be a very thorough document.
Yeah, and I think, you know, especially at my level as a general manager, to be more engaged with the Army Corps. I think that the Water Alternatives Ad Hoc Committee, and I don't think it would be a bad idea to make trips down there periodically, especially with the new commander in place as of the end of July. Just get a better handle on where they are. We still need to schedule a follow-up. Director Rice requested that from our last workshop we had, that we have a follow-up at least on the alternatives and have at least some more discussion on the 4 alternatives that were chosen and have a better explanation and a better reason why those alternatives were chosen compared to what the board chose. So I think once we get past this, get past the work we're doing administratively right now on connection fees and things like that, I think it should be our focus to re-engage our alternate source of water for the community.
I think it's
Director Rice?
especially important, considering the new Water Resources Act that the Senate and the House are looking at, which doesn't have a specific call-out for Cambria. Previous versions had a specific call-out for Cambria, and going forward, they have things like deauthorizing certain projects. I think if we're not the squeaky wheel, that we may get mowed under. So if we're serious about trying to maintain our funding for this, we need to make sure that they know that we're serious about pursuing this. I don't necessarily agree with the project, but if we want to at least get through the EIR, we better make sure that that's happening.
And part of the budget process is we did allocate for the Ferguson group, because they quoted us such a reasonable amount. We did put $18,000 in this proposed budget for half of the fiscal year for the Ferguson group, which is $3,000 a month. So have it not only engage at our level, but also from a legislative standpoint is also important. So there is some funding, not funding that was available before, but we'll see how that goes. That's up to the board's decision. So.
Director Clift, you got your button pushed, or no, you're done? Okay.
I just had one other thing on the facilities and resources, page 22. We talk about 2 dead and dangerous trees that were removed, which just brought to mind, if Carlos works with the forest committee, or if he attends the forest committee meetings, I'm sure that would be, I'm sure they would appreciate being in that loop for, since they are still attempting to get funding and do the forest management plan, which is part of our long range mitigation for Cambria. Might be a good idea.
Okay, we have one request to speak on item 6. Mary Webb?
Mary Webb, Cambria, thanks for the opportunity to speak. Since you are talking about, I know later in the agenda too, about increasing employee reimbursement for travel and whether it's lobbying or whatever you plan on doing, I'm hoping that you're actually going to go and talk about other kinds of water projects, not just specifically having a lobbyist or having any one of you guys just go to Washington to talk about desalination, because you know where that's going to get us. It's just a total waste of time and money. But there is all kinds of other money out there for other kinds of projects, and I really hope that you expand, just your reference of all the different kinds of grant funding that's available for a lot of other things other than just strictly a desalination project. And then the only other thing on the manager's report, I was a little concerned about the SR4 well, because I did read later in the agenda that it's on this automatic timer now, so it's running like 12 hours a day. And I know when Jim Adams was really always looking at what's going on by actually looking at the creek and looking at the steelhead to make sure there was some water in there during the summer. And I'm wondering now if it's because this automatic timer is just pumping water 12 hours a day, whether we need it or not, it is harming the coastal resources, which is absolutely a violation of the Coastal Act. So that's one of the big concerns. And again, the manager's report, I just think he's doing a really great job, but it's 7 pages or 8 pages, and it's everybody's report in one, and it's just not detailed enough. I really think that it's our number one job. We really need to be talking a lot more about just what's going on, and spending a lot less time on Feel Good Thursday or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Directors, before we move on, I neglected to mention during the agenda review that the closed session for today will be rescheduled for next month, and so there will be no closed session after today's meeting.
What am I going to do with all that food? That's,
You had your snacks. I know
I
that
made
disappoints
paella.
everyone. Okay.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
On what, to some extent, what Ms. Webb brought up there. One of the reasons I brought up that timeline thing is that in order for us to really consider alternative things, we're somewhat trapped by what the Army Corps of Engineers does. And so for us to take off on another track presents some difficulties, and one of the reasons I think we need to have more discussions with the Army Corps of Engineers is to get that finished so that we can make that decision or go a different direction. I think we'd probably run into real problems if we tried to do something different from what they're talking about right now. But right now, to some extent, they're holding us hostage to being able to consider anything else. And so I think that's why we need to get moving with them as soon as possible.
Okay, Mr. Walters, yes, another public comment?
Thank you. Didn't know how else to put it. I'm sorry if it looks confusing. Again, it was following up with the water issue that I was talking about, and since I thought you put that rather eloquently. At any rate, the point that I was trying to make that I didn't get to make earlier, and I'm sorry I was being a little bit long-winded, was the real point that I also wanted to remember is there's a real problem that we're facing as far as our water table, as far as threats to the water table, besides the threats as far as the climate changing. We now have a current and ongoing threat of possible fracking in the area, and I don't think any of that has been addressed as far as water table issues, and I thought it should be at least brought up for the board to consider when issuing permits or further, shall we say, use to the water table as threats increase, and that has to do with fracking in the area. So PG&E is apparently interested in doing so, and of course fracking, if you're not entirely sure what that is, that's what happens when they try to do drilling for exploratory drilling for oil, particularly in this case oil shales in the area that do extend through the Cambria area. So they may in fact want to come here. This would be something that I think should be on your radar, just so that you're aware of as a board that is concerned about issues of the community here. That this is coming to our area and we need to do something about it. I think it's completely injurious to the community, and if we do have fracking in the area, our water table is very likely to be at extreme risk, because what they do into the soils in the area is that they inject chemistry into the soils. It essentially includes turpentine-like fuels and gasoline into the area in order to extract oil out of oil shales that exist in our bedrock. The fracking term means to fracture those soils, and the problem is that it also will affect aquifers that are part of that fracturing process. That means that oil and gas and other chemistries can get into the water system and further actually destroy it, so therefore you can no longer drink from the aquifer. I think it's an extreme issue, and it needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be thought about when considering water use and our future use to our water table. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Okay, moving on to member and committee reports, and if we could hold the budget committee report until we get to the budget committee item, that would work for us. So are there any other committee reports, member reports to Director Robinette?
Yes, I'll just give a report on the pros meeting this month, and
No, your time's not done.
my time's up. At the pros meeting, it was, again, they are looking at ways to do a couple of things that involve the Fiscalini Ranch, some improvements, continuing improvements there. Actually, we're talking about funding in this case for a couple of improvements that they've talked about. And then also they talked about the possibility of with our dog park, finding perhaps a new home for the dog park. And it was a good discussion. It really was. There are three three of the pros commissioners working on this, Tim Roche and Joyce Renshaw and Adolph Atencio. And it was, the discussion was, let's look bigger, let's look at the big picture, let's not look at funding from the county arm of pros that possibly does have grants and does have some funding. Let's take a look and really evaluate our needs. Let's look at cost, potential cost, how much would it cost to actually move these things forward? And then let's work on a grant proposal that Tim and the rest of the committee would take forward. I thought it was a very productive meeting, a very good discussion. It was really looking at, okay, how do we get our grant so that it's clearly and well developed, so that we have not just one small grant at a time, but kind of a big picture grant. So that was pretty much the meeting for pros this month. And then I just wanted to comment, I suppose this is a good place. It really is just, it is that I attended the Chamber of Commerce, what I thought was a great networking experience here at the Vets Hall. Various businesses, it was kind of an outreach and networking. We're sharing information on their particular business. And it was just really nice to see what a good job the CSD staff and General Manager Gruber did. He was here, Monique was here. They had a nice table and display set up. And I think that's part of what we want to do for outreach is when we have gatherings like that, and there was great attendance at it, to make sure that we're represented, that people can interact with the general manager more on an informal basis. So I just wanted to compliment you on the good job that you and the CSD staff did that night.
Thank you. And just another note back to the Tourist Board and Linda Finley's presentation. The Tourism Board has serious dollars that they can make available. You know, we're talking something like $200,000 to $300,000 a year. So it's a great opportunity to tap into that for some of the pros-related things. And it just occurred to me that the dog park draws a lot of visitors. People come here with their dogs, they end up going to the dog park, and that would be a natural for funding, I would think. Same thing with FFRP, and that there must be some projects that they could submit for that. And so I would hope that they would do that and follow up with the Tourism Board.
I think that's a great idea. I think looking at various sources for funding would really be helpful.
Okay, Director Rice, you have a report?
Yes, I have a couple of reports. I attended the NCAC meeting. Pardon my, if I lose my voice today, I have a little bit of a cold. I went to the NCAC meeting last week, and they considered and supported a liquor license for Wise Owl, which is over on Center Street. And they looked at a permit for AT&T for communications for an additional, on a tower that's already there, for AT&T's internal company use. And there was a report from Public Works about the road closure due to the Main Street Bridge project. And they're going to have detour signs, mostly for tourists, because the bridge isn't going to be closed for the majority of the construction. But they're going to be directing people around instead of coming down Main Street while they're doing the construction there. We also had a presentation from the Planning Department on new stormwater management rules that are going to be going into place. And they are on a tight schedule to get this approved because apparently the regional board had requested that they do this by September 6th. If anybody is interested in, they talk about hydro modification and doing things like having it, pervious surfaces on your projects and things like that, mainly to reduce the amount of non-point source pollution that goes into the watershed. and trying to maintain flooding control. So if anybody is interested in that further, please get a hold of me on that. And also, I attended, along with Merle, the Module 3 of the SDRMA CSDA, the California Special Districts Association Comprehensive Governance Series, Board's role in finance and fiscal accountability. Perfect timing. We were in Monterey for that day-long seminar, and both Merle and I completed the four courses that are required. I would encourage the rest of the board members to attend. There's one that's actually a 3-day that you get all four in the fall for 3 days. So it cuts the amount of time that you have to spend doing it, but it also reduces our risk level, and so our insurance rates go down, which is as good a reason as any to do it. But it was very helpful to me. It was very helpful. I learned a lot of things about fiscal accountability and finance I didn't know before. And the last item is the Ad Hoc Committee for Water Conservation. We had presented to us by the engineer. He ran the model, the water supply and demand model analysis, and this was done on June 6th. And the finding was that, and I'm just going to read it if I can. At this time, the projected supply from San Simeon and Santa Rosa aquifers would meet the projected demand, as the recent demands are already 12% less than the mean annual values used in the model for determining an unrestrained demand. By utilizing well SR4, a stage 1, 2, or 3 water shortage emergency condition would not be required. However, water conservation, efficient water use, and avoiding any waste of water should remain a top CCSD priority. So when they ran the model, it said that we're good to go. We're already below what our mean annual use is, and we should be fine as long as we maintain on the path that we're already on in terms of being smart water users. Did you have anything to add to that, Gail?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to add, during that meeting too, I believe that's when we also did discuss with the engineer that in fact the aquifers had been recharged since April.
Plus, we had that good rain 2 days ago, which was the day after I washed my car.
Okay, thank you for that report. Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll move forward to the consent calendar, and we have one person who would like to speak on item 7D, and that's Dave Flynn, the County of Los Angeles. Dave, welcome. Going back a long way.
Yeah, just nearby in San Luis Obispo. Dave Flynn with Public Works, and I just ask your approval for this item today. It's an easement actually to PG&E, as shown in the staff report, for them to relocate a facility in conjunction with our overall bridge project. And we thank your staff and yourselves for working and attending to this matter. Our contractor, Sousa Construction, intends to be out there after July 4th weekend to begin work. And as mentioned, it will be a prolonged construction period. We don't expect the project to be completed until fall of 2014. And also, as noted, the real traffic impacts would really be limited to the summer of 2014. So we do not anticipate any significant traffic issues for the foreseeable future, again, until next summer. So thank you.
Dave, wasn't there at some point in time discussion about putting in a temporary bridge adjacent to the one that's going to be constructed?
Not to my recollection. The design of it was always to put it upstream of the existing bridge so that we would always have the use of the existing bridge during the construction period until, we can move traffic over to the new bridge.
Okay, Director Robinette?
It's so nice to see you here. This is a totally unrelated question to what you were talking about. But I think that you have been involved a little bit with Supervisor Gibson and state parks, and we were talking earlier today in the presentation here. We had done that connector trail at the beginning of Moonstone Drive, and I think it was you that was involved too, and we were looking at the parking lot to the north of that hotel, the Calibre Hotel, and realizing the parking there really creates a net. That's the only other hazard that we can see along the entire Moonstone Beach Trail now. And I thought we were having a cooperative kind of solution to that with the state parks, and so that the cars could be there, but that we could have clearly a space where a trail would be outside that scope. Do you recall that and where we are?
Yeah, that's correct. I know our staff has met with state parks out there on site and has, I don't know if they've received it yet or not, but just a plan of what that configuration would be so that the vehicles could be parked right alongside the street, and then there's a clear walkway for the trail. That's going to be done through kind of an encroachment permit process where we just issue them a no-cost encroachment permit, and then parks would follow up, likely again with the California Conservation Corps to do the necessary improvements.
I just thank you for that. I have been so pleased that we have been able, while it's not actually CSD's jurisdiction there, but the partnership with you and the state parks resulted, first of all, in that six-year pursuit of the first little connector trail. But this will really be kind of just the final touch, and it just will be quite wonderful because that trail by now extends well beyond Luffingwell and further north, and so it just becomes a seamless part of the coastal trail system. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I had a question. I just want to,
Directors, our attorney is giving us the eye over there. I think that the nexus between Connector Trail and Main Street Bridge is a little thin.
this is on the Main Street Bridge.
Okay.
Opportunity, I'm sorry.
Okay.
When you begin on the Main Street Bridge project, one of the first things you do is going to be vegetation removal, yes?
Correct. The area just immediately upstream of the existing bridge.
I know
would be
somebody,
doing that.
at the North Coast Advisory Council, somebody had expressed some interest in getting the trees that were there that are going to be taken out. Is there a specific person that would be a good contact? Nobody at the NCAC that was from the county, from the NCAC meeting knew who to?
Yeah, we have an assigned resident engineer on the job, and if there's
Okay.
someone that's interested, we can readily just provide that information to our resident engineer to contact them.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Mr. Finn. The vote on this will take place when we deal with the consent agenda. We did have one item that was pulled on the consent agenda. That is item 7F. And Mr. Gruber, if you could present that item.
Thank you, President Thompson and board members. 7F is consider adoption of Resolution 262013, approving revised facilities and resources supervisor salary. So let's talk about the position. The current individual who is in this position has been in that position for about a little over 2 years. Has done an exemplary job. I think that the entire Facilities and Resources Department has really gone up a notch, including the Fiscalini Ranch. And this individual with 2 employees, really one full-time in addition to himself and one with 32 hours a week, has a tremendous amount of responsibility. The Veterans Hall, the bathrooms, the skate park, all of our open space as it relates to lots, the Fiscalini Ranch, and pretty much any of our tangible facilities and resource assets. Just to note that we probably could have done a little bit better job. This $13,000, that includes salary and benefit increase. But with this $13,823 increase, including benefits, the salary range is still considerably less than what the previous facilities and resource manager made. The previous facilities and resource manager made about $94,000, and what we're proposing here is about $80,000 a year. The individual that is in that particular position right now, the Facilities and Resources Department supervisor, makes $70,000 a year. And so this is something I think that is merited. And to kind of keep it in its proper perspective, it is considerably less than what the previous Facilities and Resource Director, Facilities and Resource Manager was making. So there was about a 2-year period, 2.5-year period, where the salary range was about $24,000 less than what his predecessor was making.
Okay, discussion, Director Rice called it, so what you...
So the first thing I'd like to say is this isn't, whoever the person is in the position is irrelevant. This is actually just about the money and putting out extra money. The previous person who was in the position for how many years?
You know, I don't recall. It was probably for an extended period of time, 8 or 9 years, probably.
It just seems excessive to me when we're trying to, and probably odd that I would pull this item, considering that every time we have something on the agenda regarding something that has to do with personnel issues, that I say that it's really should be up to the GM. But when it comes to the money and the salaries, this is something that we have to approve. And I think that at this time, it's an excessive amount to be increasing for somebody who hasn't been in the job for very long and without a better job description. I know that he does a lot of work, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to be bumping him up this high. And over the long term, the liability to the district over the long term in terms of what this is going to continue to cost, because it will continue to go up from here. I just think it's probably just too quick to be raising it $13,000. That seems like a lot to me.
Okay, Director Berenger, then Director Robinette.
I can concur somewhat. If we didn't have this on the agenda, though, the general manager would be able to do what he wants. A 15% change immediately might be something that the general manager should consider for us to say that it can be up to that at this juncture, and let the movement be a little more gradual, something I would support. But I think it's the general manager's call.
Director Robinette.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. First of all, I do recall too, and I'm glad you brought that out, that the current manager for this department for facilities and the ranch land, how long had he served for CSD as the second in charge there? How long had he been working here?
This individual's worked for the district quite a few years. It's my understanding he started out as in the fire department and then transferred over to the Facilities and Resources. So as the number 2 person, he was in that role. Although he was a maintenance technician at that time, he was in that role for a considerable amount of time. I believe probably the entire duration that the previous Resource and Facilities Manager was in that position. So he served faithfully under that Facilities and Resources Manager's position. But also we need to, and everybody got a calculator. Again, this is with benefits also. So the 15% is a true statement, but it also includes the benefit side of things. So,
well, I do recall this a bit, and it seemed that while he had served in the department for quite a while, had the experience, that it was somehow presented to him that we want you to have the job, we want you to have the position, we want you to have the title, but we want you to take a pay cut. And he seemed to be very positive and very willing to do that. So it would seem that maybe, given his previous seniority and years now in this promotion, that it's time to go ahead. And while it's still not as much as the previous person, is it?
no, from a salary-wise perspective, it's about $14,000 less per year than the previous Facility and Resource Manager was making.
So it's like a step. It's almost a step position.
Well,
Yeah.
what happened is when management positions exit the organization, it's an opportunity for us to evaluate those salary ranges. For an example, the water supervisor recently retired, and we did not fill that position. That was a $100,000 a year position that we didn't fill. For an exchange of that, we promoted a utilities manager, and then we'll ask for a water and wastewater operator. But I think as people leave the organization, it's really a good time to evaluate their salaries. I think it's really important. And with this particular individual in this particular management position, there was a sense of humility and a sense of commitment also that said, I will take at that point in time roughly about $24,000 less than what the current facilities and resource manager was making, so I can prove myself, if you will, during this two-plus year duration. And I think hands down he has. I think that particular department's probably never run better. But I also understand the sensitivity relating to this. I can appreciate that.
So I just have a question, because we don't have what it had been, what the entry and top had been on this, in the report. It just has what you're proposing it to be. So I don't even know what it used to be. But which of these 5 levels is he going to be considered to be paid at? I mean, obviously, it's not the entry level, yes?
The annual salary would be rated at $80,000 a year. That would be his salary. So I don't have a
So you don't know which one it
I'm
is?
trying to do the math, but I'm also trying to talk here. So we have a salary range of $54.84, which, if I did the math right, it's $65,808. And then the salary that goes to $66,666 per month. If I times that annually, I was right about in the middle to do it. Let me just do the math really quick, if you don't mind. 13, 13, it would be the top range at the 6666, which would be $79,991 is being proposed.
So he would be at the top salary level for that?
That's correct.
So even though he's been there only 2 years and could be there for another 15 or 20, he's not ever going to get a raise unless we change this range again?
No, that's not necessarily true. The range could be changed based on labor negotiations and the benefits and compensation package for the managers. So, no, he wouldn't have a level change. That would be something that would have to be brought back to the board again. Just like when the previous facilities and resource manager retired, the position was offered to him for considerably less than what that individual was making. So with this new salary range, yes, it is the salary range of $5,484 a month to $6,666 would put him at the top, which is $79,991. So it's a $9,991 raise. Let me say that again, $9,991 raise annually. If you divide that by 12, you can come up with a monthly increase, and then divide it by 26. It kind of gives you an idea of what would be offering the individual for this. But
But you're comfortable with it, and it's clear that still this is a pretty good savings on the part of the CSD compared to what we were paying before.
Well, it's a savings compared to what we were paying before, and I don't ever want to compare past employees to previous employees or anything like that, or what previous employees were being paid. But I think this particular individual, as far as being a senior management position within the organization, has proven himself. And I think it's important as we look forward more on a macro level versus a micro level, is it's really important that I have good, reliable senior management staff below me, whatever those positions are, whether it's any position in the organization, because I think myself as general manager will only be as good as the people that are directly below me. So I think it's important that we have good people and that we compensate them accordingly for it.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
and that is my feeling, and that's why I'm suggesting that however this salary chart got to be this way, actually, as high as he can go on this chart is still below what the position was paid before. And I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not discussing who held the position before or that type of thing. I'm just saying that CSD still comes out ahead.
Correct, and if you look how the Facilities and Resources Department was staffed before, we had the previous Facility and Resource Manager, we had Carlos with one time, he was a full-time person, and then we had a 20-hour-a-week person who retired. That was how the Facilities and Resources Department was staffed. So we're right about at the same level even with this salary adjustment, because now we have a Facilities and Resource Manager, a full-time person, and a 32-hour-a-week person. And look how much more we're getting done. We're seeing the fruits of our labor. And I know it's just, you know, I don't want it to be necessarily a feel-good Thursday like Mary said, but I think we're starting to see the results of all these things in the quality of work that's being done out on the ranch. You know, one of the long-term concerns that I have is, and I've spoken about this, and I don't want to go on too long, is that, you know, we bought the ranch, and I'm so glad we did. I think it's one of our most valuable assets, but we never implemented any kind of funding mechanism to maintain that ranch. And it's 500 acres and it requires a lot of work. And so I think with the staff we have now, we're doing a good job, but that's something for another discussion later on in time.
Okay, Director Clift has been waiting patiently, so let's turn to him.
And I've been trying to figure out what my answer was from the discussions here, and my question basically was what the current range is the top of about 5,800 a month.
Yeah, the current range is, he's pretty much topped out at where he's at.
Yep, what's the number? Is it around 5,800?
Yes.
I figured when I took that 9,900 divided by 12, I get a little over $800 a month. Subtract that from the 666, I get about 6,666. That's a good number, interesting number. Come out with around 5,800 now. My point is that position is a management position. It supervises people. It might only supervise 1 3/4 at this point in time, but it is a supervisory position. And at the current rate, it is barely above an administrative technician. And so the fact that it is a management position and the fact that it does supervise other people, it is the lowest paid of the supervisory positions. But it's still, I think, I think you have to look at it in terms of some of the other supervisory positions as a supervisor and put it in there. So I don't necessarily object. I don't want to take into account who the previous party was or who the current party was or any of those things. I guess I'm just looking at it as saying it's not out of line in terms of what we have approved for other supervisory positions. It's still the lowest paid supervisory position, and so I don't have a particular problem with it all, you know, go along with whatever the board goes along with.
Before we take a motion on it, we do have one person wanting to speak on this. Mr. McKinnon?
Yeah, Jerry McKinnon. It's been my track record whenever I speak up for something, it gets defeated. But I'll take the chances on this. I understand the job that this man has to do. I think you're looking at him as a man who works with his head. But ladies and gentlemen, he's a hands-on individual. He's on the tractor, he's on the mowing machine, he's on the mop on the floor in this building. He, as well as do those administrative things that you want him to do as a part of his job description. I believe he does them all well. And from having worked in his particular position 25 years ago, I know what he's up against insofar as hands-on. And so I would like to have you consider that in your decision-making about the value of this individual to the Cambria community. If he weren't such an enterprising individual and willing to work up a sweat in order to get his job done, the ranch wouldn't look like it looks like, this building wouldn't look like it looks like. He's an individual who is dedicated to the task. And I think by your making his wages commensurate with the performance of his duty, that's another way of saying thank you to him. And he deserves all the praise that we can give him as an employee. That's a very biased position I have, I know, but I don't want those things to be overlooked. A very hard-working gentleman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. I think perhaps your record might end today.
My last comment is, and one of the reasons I pulled this is I did want to have a further discussion, so I had a better understanding of how my fellow board members felt about this. But we didn't get what the previous scale was. We didn't get a job description to tell us how much this person actually, except for something very, very general. And there isn't any comparison to similar jobs outside of this community and how this salary would compare to those. Now, Cambria is unique, and the way that our system is set up is different from other people's, but I feel like I didn't have enough information in the packet to confidently just have this without discussion. Thank you.
Recognizing
We
that.
have Dr. Berenger, then Director Robinette.
Recognizing that, Director, I move that we approve 7F.
Second.
We handle it individually?
Do we handle it individually, or do we put it back on the
Yes,
agenda?
because it's been pulled.
It's been pulled, I think.
Okay.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded and discussion. Director Robinette?
No, I just wanted to say too, and I agree that it's helpful when we see some benchmark kind of references to what you were bringing up, Director Rice, that I like to, if we can, see what other people with similar positions make in the area, if it's actually comparable. And I do think, looking from where we started and then we dropped it down and where this would take it, that always is helpful, I think, in our discussions. But so I certainly support where we are now.
Thank you. And Jerry, I wholeheartedly second your comments. I think that they were right on target. No further discussion. All those in favor of the motion to approve item 7F?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposed. Unanimously approved. Now we have before us the consent agenda.
Move approval of consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and also noted that Director Berenger will not be voting on item 7D. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved. We did have one request to go back for a comment on item 6B, and since this is Feel Good Thursday, Mary, please.
Okay, got me. So, yes, sorry about that, but it went so fast. Amanda, or Director Rice was talking about the water model being run June 6th and just read from a report. But, again, since water is like our major issue down here, I would really like to have that report made public. It should be, whatever it was she read from should be in the packet today, which it wasn't in the packet today, or at least on the website. Because I didn't really fully understand what she said there. It just happened so fast. And the other thing is, just as I realized the manager's report, 6A and 6B were going by, there was no water production report in the packet today, which is something that my comrades, I could just hear everybody yelling, where's the production report? Because we know the last production report, the water in production has increased to levels we haven't seen since 2007. So that's a real concern, and everybody's wondering what happened last month. And there's no water person here to tell us what production was last month. And well level reports were not in the packet this month either. And when we're having a meeting that's coming up, then some of the next, 9A, item 9A is going to be talking about growth and, issuing intent to service. At the same time, we're missing water data out of this report. Thank you.
Thank you.
It might be appropriate to put that on maybe on the website or a discussion of what that model thing is and what its results were.
Well, I think it warrants some additional conversation, the water model in general, and some of the concerns that myself and district council have regarding it. So if at a future agenda items,
Okay.
that's something that the board wants to decide and vote on, if they want that would be fine. But I think it needs more of a general discussion, especially when that model was done. It did not include the Santa Rosa wells. It did include the SR4 wells. So I think really what the question is that modeling valid?
And the model itself, when you look at the report, it does take a huge amount of context to understand even what you're looking at, and the finding is really that when the numbers get plugged in for how much rain we've had, how much water we've been using, how much water we're expected to use, the finding comes out that we're going to probably have enough water, and we're not going to have to implement any emergency based on the model.
And there are.
It might be
yeah.
appropriate for a future board
Yeah.
item then.
And there are other methodologies. I think, most water districts use well levels, and there are other environmental factors that we could consider. I would ask for some guidance from the board regarding the production. Again, future agenda items, if the board wants to see production things in the agenda packet, that's fine. It is on our website. And just Mary's concern about the SR4 well and running it 12 hours a day. We do monitor the creek, and the creek's flowing right now above the SR4 well, and the creek's flowing below it. So I have pictures on my phone. So if you think that I'm just texting my wife here, I'm not actually, because as soon as Mary asked her that question, it'd be really neat to be able to interface my phone with that picture up there and show you. But we do. We don't arbitrarily just run our system willy-nilly. The creek is flowing right now, and it's flowing quite well.
Could I just ask to, it is true, typically we do have the graphs and comparative data. I was just curious why it wasn't here, and if it is done, will it, or completed, will it go on the CSD website?
Yeah, I was surprised to see that my apologies, we just must have overlooked it. I don't see the graphs in mine, and I take responsibility for that. It was nothing covert or anything like that. We just.
I did not think so. But
yeah, we just forgot to put them in. So again, consistently what we do is we put the data in the wells as far as the gradients, and then we put the charts in. Anything above and beyond that, it's on the website, but I would just ask for some guidance under future agenda items, what the board would like to, the board would like to see in this packet and what they're not, because that information is available on the website.
Personally,
And I do think that is very important information to have in the board packet, as well as on the website.
I agree. Having the well production and the levels is one of the things that have been in the production chart hasn't been in traditionally, but the other ones have all been in there every month for years and years. It's good, and people have gotten used to seeing what that is. Having the well production data as well every month, I think it's good. We're asking people to pay attention to how much they're using. They want to see the bigger picture, and I think it's good to include it.
Yeah,
And I think
agree.
it's, if I could, I think it's interesting because I've certainly been one to kind of say, I think the information is critical, but we could have a better format. We don't need all those wavy lines everywhere. But now that they're not there, I really miss them.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving to item 8A of hearings and appeals. Mr. Gruber, if you would introduce the item, and then let's hear from the Budget Committee on this item, then we'll open it up for more discussion.
Thank you, President Thompson and board members. This is the final draft of the 2013-2014 budget. There were some really good questions asked last time regarding funds being taken from reserves, specifically water and wastewater reserves, or the enterprise funds, if you will. And so at the back of your packet right now, what I wanted to be able to do as best I could is to tell a story. And that story is simply this, that we budget money And sometimes that money is spent, sometimes it's not spent, whether it's for projects within the budget or whether it's for staffing. And we have some information in the back that Alan did, and I'll let him share that kind of shows in the Water and Wastewater Department that we allocated money for certain levels of staffing, but we did not fill those positions. And then there was projects that were identified within the budget process over the last 4 or 5 years that we just didn't get to for one reason or another. Those reasons could include that we did it in-house, or that we just didn't have the time to manage the projects or get them done. Now, the result of that is that at the end of the fiscal year, if those monies that are not identified in the budget process aren't spent, then they return back to the enterprise funds for the water and wastewater. And you can see that there is a period of time that those reserves have built back up based on projects and staffing levels that were not completely fulfilled. Also, we are taking money out of reserves this year to do projects, and that really shows that we are addressing some of the things that weren't previously done. With that being said, I also have an executive summary, but maybe if the Budget Committee could go over their work and kind of some of their thoughts on it, if that's okay with the Board President, and if that's okay with the Budget Committee. And then I'll go over I'll just go over the budget, and then I'll have Alan go over the last 3 or 4 pages that really address some of those reserve balances, where they were, where they are now, and how they relate to the money that we are asking to be spent as part of this fiscal year budget. Again, this is a larger budget, and we are taking money out of reserves. However, it's for projects that need to get done. So, thank you.
Well, I'll start. Yes, since you're talking about, and I think that's a good place to start, the reserves, and that how did they get there in the first place? They got there, of course, with someone not hired or projects not being completed. And the only comment at first that I would ask, because certainly I noticed that, we had $516,299 now that has been from reserves. And it does seem like a lot, but I then look at the bigger picture and I look at the budget, and we're talking about compared to the reserves, we're looking at between 1%, almost 2%, and that is a very small percent of your total reserves. And it again is money that got carried into that category because it was budgeted prior to, and other times it was budgeted and not used. So that's how it got increased, and that's why the reserves look like they're increased, when really it's just work that didn't get finished.
As the other member of the Budget Committee, I'd like to go over a couple of things. One, I've been a member of the Budget Committee since 2008, and when former Director McKinnon and I were instrumental in a lot of slashing of budgets during that, and Alan will probably, we did a lot of battles in the district office, 2008, 2009, 2010. It had to do with reductions in staff, I think reductions in positions that aren't here now, arguments relative to when people are promoted, or the consolidations of not paying top salary to the person, and those kinds of things. And I would have to say that our concern at that time was that, are we being efficient, and are we at the point where we're using the right amount of resources in the right places? And of course, we were making decisions from the standpoint of outsiders looking at the budget. But an outsider looking at the performance of the budget internally, one of the ways I think that you might have been successful is you get to the point where you might be starting to lose efficiencies by not having the right amount of people and the right amount of resources in the right place. So I would have to say that one of the things that's represented in this budget is some increased staffing. There's a net 2.5 positions net, if I remember right.
That's correct.
Now, those 2.5 position net increase, but you need to understand there were some offsets because one of the decreased positions was at the highest level, and some of the positions that you're talking about creating are at a very low level. So financially, yes, there is some increase because of that. But I would have to say that it's been my feeling that we probably cut to the bone, and now if we want to get things done and go forward, we probably do have to fill back in a few places. And I think increasing the water coordinator to a full-time position for a half-time is kind of the things we're talking about adding, and they're adding, I think it was an additional 8 hours to the facilities and resource. That person that's 32 hours was 20 hours or something like that. So there's some additions that are not necessarily totally new people, but people doing more within what we expect of them. The second thing is that during the last couple of years, there has been no operational budget category for increases to revenue, or to reserves. But in fact, increases to reserves did occur, and they did occur because of efficiencies, because of not filling positions, and because of not doing some things, and maybe not having the ability to do some things because they didn't have the staff to totally do it. So I guess my position is that I would consider this budget balanced based on operations, and that they're filling back in from reserves to get some of those projects done and to make the commitment to the conservation program. Because you remember, 3 years ago we had $2,000 in conservation, and you got probably 300,000 in now. So to make that commitment, you've got to provide the people and you got to provide the resources. But those resources are coming back, I think, from savings that were in the past. And again, it looks like you're decreasing your reserves, but in fact, the reserves were increased because we didn't do some of those things. So I'm comfortable with the budget the way it is. It's actually increasing staff, increasing the things we expect to get done, increasing some of the capital projects, and increasing the conservation thing. And I think it's still doing it within our budget range. I will also tell you that it is tight and it is close. And as we look forward, if we don't have new sources of funds, and you will notice that there are funds in here for rate studies in both water and wastewater, and although we don't have to spend them at the start of the fiscal year, they need to be there available so that towards the end part of the fiscal year, if we haven't found new rate sources or new income sources or been able to conserve in certain areas, we're going to have to face the reality that an aging infrastructure with the same number of customers is going to have to pay more money to keep it up. So even if we found new revenue sources, there's money in here that might not be spent, or might be less spent, or might mitigate other things. So that's basic. I'm sure Alan will go through the specific things of what was added in and what was taken back, and give you the exact numbers. But I think overall, I'm not concerned with the fact that we're going into reserves, because those are reserves that were created by efficiencies within the system. They're not, I don't think we're in the business of creating savings accounts. We're in the business of providing certain services. And we can't simply say, we got to keep building a bigger savings account and either not do the services or charge the people more money so that we can have a bigger savings account.
Yeah, I would also note, and one of the ways of raising revenue is to take advantage of various grant sources that are available to you. I know that there's some funding in here for a grant writer, part-time, not even part-time, just a consultant services grant writer for fire department. And being familiar with the grant business in my previous employ, I know that there's a lot of money out there for public safety activity and certainly fire services and so forth. And it's good that we take advantage of that and make sure that if there are grant opportunities that we're available, that we're ready to go after them.
I think any new source of income or revenue is I'm more than happy to accept it and work for it. But at the same time, I think we have to provide the people the time. I hate to say this, but I think what I and some of the prior board members did, we engineered a system that cut right to the bone and maybe cut to the point where to get their job done, they couldn't do some of the things that might be what you're talking about. But again, my position was, until we get to that point, we don't know where the bottom is.
Anyone else? Mr. General Manager, did you want to go into it a little bit more in detail with the?
Sure. If you would, I'm going to start from the back, and then Alan's going to, but I just wanted to dovetail on what Director Cliff said on page 121, if we could just take a minute to look at page 121. And it kind of paints a picture of the water and wastewater reserves and what we're really talking about. And you can see the water reserves and the wastewater reserves. And you can see the wastewater reserve started out at about $27,551 in 2009 and finished the audited in 2012 at somewhere around $450,000. Water started out at zero, and in 2012, over about a 4-year period, finished at $783,000. So we saw the reserves build up. This is again due to the cuts that Director Cliff referred to, not finishing projects, and then also some of the staff doing it themselves. So what we're doing is just recapturing a percentage of those. I'd like Alan to go over just page 122 through 125 really quick, since he's the author of these, and then I can start, if you want me to, at the front of the budget and just go over some key points, if that's all right with the board.
Thank you, General Manager, members of the board. Page 122 shows some of what we've been talking about, where the reserves came from. And I realize it's a full, somewhat a busy page, not necessarily the easiest to follow, but it's broken out year by year. The first year where there's no increase in reserves, of course, that's pretty easy. But where it, if you get down towards the middle, you could see that for the fiscal year 2010-11, there was quite a bit left over projects that were budgeted but were not done. I went ahead and showed all the projects, even the ones that were done. And I do want to mention, in some cases, it's not a matter even if they weren't done, but they ended up being done in-house. It was expected they would be contracted out, and the staff ended up doing them. That's more the smaller ones, the $6,000 type. As far as that goes, there's one situation like that I know where it's done in-house. And then even a couple where there was no set project assigned to a dollar amount, and nothing ended up being done. The not doing the projects was far from all of it, but it was a good portion of it, and not filling, having a vacant position for most of a year was certainly a large factor. The 1 year, and those items are footnoted at the bottom. And then overall, there's general budget efficiencies. Certainly what people who do budgets shoot for is you try and do them somewhat conservatively, so there should be a surplus at the end of the year, hopefully. Not always, because things break or unexpected things happen. Or in terms of revenue, we have housing crashes that, we're not, housing market crashes that we're not, forecasting as far as that goes. But overall, as been discussed, as you can see, these reserves have appeared in the last few years, and they were not, certainly for the great majority, budgeted reserves. It's a matter of we didn't spend the money where we expected to, and now we have infrastructure needs where, it does seem a good time to, fix those items. Anyway, 122 is water, and then 123 is wastewater, as far as, that goes. So if there's any questions on those specific pages, please feel free.
I'd like to point out something. If you take a look at page 111, and you take a look at, and 121, it seems, on page 111, we're talking about transferring 233,178 from reserves. If you look at page, this is the wastewater fund. And if you look at page 121, the wastewater reserve is 450,000. So you're still retaining close to 50% of the reserve that was built up from those prior years. It's not a matter of taking everything out. It's just a matter of, I think, of prudent use of some of that money. I didn't quickly check water, but probably I'm hoping it'll come out the same. Transfer there was 192, 837, and we're showing 388 in reserve. So you're really only talking about transferring about 50% of what reserves have built up out of those two. So I still think you're being prudent in the use of the money.
Alan? And just, I'll go, and one really quick on page 124 is the projected cost of staffing increases. So we talked about additional staffing. I just want to clarify those positions. The board's identified that we need a conservation specialist. Instead of hiring a conservation specialist, a member from our existing staff is going to assume that full-time position. We're going to have to backfill that position with some administrative help, so we're going to budget a part-time administrative person to cover those needs in the office. So we actually saved money there instead of going out and hiring a independent new conservation specialist. We're going to go in-house, and that person there's two components that are really particularly important: that they're well connected to the community and that they know our billing cycle backwards and forwards, and this individual does. And then we're identifying a need within the water and wastewater department, as I talked about last month, with one full-time water operator and one full-time wastewater operator, which would bring our staffing levels to each department of 4 people. We're talking about an additional 8 hours for an administrative person within that the position currently exists within the admin office, and that 8 hours per week will be in direct support of the water and wastewater administrative functions. In other words, the guys in the water and wastewater department are operators, and but there is some need for some additional administrative support to get our house in order, if you will. And then what was referred to as the additional 8 hours for the facilities and resources department, that person is 32 hours a week right now. We're going to take that person, bring them up to 40 hours a week, but we're going to split them between the water and wastewater department, however deemed necessary, but 4 hours in each department per week. The reason we think that is important is we have an automated maintenance system for the wastewater treatment facility. It's called OP10, We're eventually going to incorporate that into the water side of things. And I won't bore you, but you load in all your equipment and it spits out a report and it says what level of maintenance is getting done within your facilities. And the result of that was about 28% of the required maintenance was being done at the wastewater treatment plant with the OP10. So there was obviously a need to continue to perform more maintenance, more routine maintenance at the wastewater side, and we definitely know about the water side. So those are additional staffing is coming in. Again, we're not going heavy on staffing, but we have identified specific needs that address the water, wastewater maintenance, administration, and conservation needs of the organization without going overboard.
But again, if you total that up, that's 3.5 people. But the note at the bottom is that water supervisor position is no longer, the wastewater and the water supervisor have been consolidated into the utilities manager. So you're losing a high-level position there. So it's 2.5 net. And salary-wise, it's probably 1.25, 1.5 net.
And we did include also at board request an organizational chart, which will be a part of the budget for every year on page 95. I can go through and start at the beginning of the budget, or I can just answer any questions that the board may have.
Before you just leave one question on this, because we've talked about the addition of or reorganization of some people's assignments. And on the water and wastewater, we are adding 2 new positions, though, in addition to what we have. So you have a group, rather than 3 and 3, we'll have 4 and 4.
That's correct.
And will those be advertised?
Yes.
Okay.
President Thompson, did you want me to start at the beginning or just answer any questions about this is, other than the changes that were presented on the last page or so, a couple pages, everything else is the same from the last budget meeting. And we can answer any questions.
Yeah, this is not new information. We had it before us last month. We do have to have a public hearing on this, and so why don't I at this time open the public hearing to see if there's anyone that wants to speak to this item? And we have no cards on it, so I'll close the public hearing. And now if there's any further questions, discussions from the board or a motion, we'll go from there. Director Rice?
I just had a question about our reserves and our policy on reserves. Do we have any contingency funds? So in case, I mean, we've set aside money and allocated money for regular maintenance that we expect to be doing, and you know, the CCTV and the inspection of the wastewater system, the collection system, and these larger projects that we have money budgeted for. But do we have any contingency in case, like SR4, obviously, hopefully SR4 doesn't go down again, we just replaced it, but in case something unexpected like that, that's also significant amount of money. I mean, clearly we have enough money in the bank that if something comes up, we can pay for it, but do we have any kind of contingency or set aside, or do we have anything like that?
No, if you look at page 10, it kind of is a balance sheet. It's I call it our net worth, if you will, and that kind of identifies by fund, starting with LAIF, and you know what we have in each thing. It's really, and it's a good question. It's a very good question.
Page 10.
Page 10, do we have a fund balance policy or a reserve fund policy? And the answer to that is no. It would be relatively easy to put one together working with the budget committee that would, and I've done them before, that says, okay, we want to keep 3 months of operating supply on hand in case something catastrophic happened and we had no sources of revenue. And then maybe with the remaining money in LAIF or something like that, we could identify, designate it specifically for capital and kind of keep it. But the answer is no. And would it be a good idea to have one? Sure, I think it'd be a really good idea to have one. But as Alan always says, it can always be predicated by another board. And so what you would want to do is, if you really want a good, sound fund balance policy or reserve policy, and you don't want those monies to be easily manipulated or changed from your focus, you could have a policy that addresses a 4/5 vote required to change it, and that makes it That makes it a little more difficult because you can always get 3 on a fund balance policy. 4 makes it a little more difficult in protect. One of the concerns I do have is I think we're sufficiently funded relating to operations if something happened, but Alan and I do have concerns about our capital improvement needs and the money we do have or don't have set aside. So say if our assets, our combined assets are worth about $45 million, that's our entire water and wastewater system, above the ground and below. I think a good starting point maybe would be about 10%, and we'd want to build for there. Obviously, with the fund balance policy or reserve policy, we couldn't get there right away, but we could put a mechanism that would allow us to set money aside. For an example, within, and I don't know if you'd want to be this detailed, but in the water side of the fund balance policy, you would want to, we eventually want to start setting money aside for meter replacement. We know that that day of reckoning is going to come, and we're going to need to have about $1 million to $1.3 million set aside to replace our meters. And so we don't have any money set aside for that now, so you could incorporate that. They're relatively easy to do, and but I would defer to the board and the budget committee, and we'd be more than happy to put one together.
This might not be a bad situation, or this might be a, let me put it in the positive, this might be a good situation where we have a standing finance committee, because we do have a fair amount of assets in cash and assets in actual things in the ground that to be monitoring this more closely and making sure that we are doing the best we should be doing with the way we're doing these things. I'm not expert in these things. It just seemed, I mean, I just came off of this training though, so that's, sorry, right before the budget, that had to happen like that. That maybe it's not a bad idea. I mean, we've got the money, but it's not a bad idea to maybe set something like that, so.
Director Berger? And just as a kind of a question more than anything else, is that if we had 10% of our $45 million worth of assets being maintained each year, in other words, that's the budget we have, then when it came time for us to change meters, that 10%, that $450,000 should be devoted toward that. Or this is more of a question, if we applied 10% for continuing maintenance, can we maintain forever, or would we also have to have not only 10% per year, but would we also then, well, yeah, would we then also have to set aside money, or wouldn't that just be enough?
I think based on the needs of the CIP list, that we talked about, the capital improvement list, it's pretty extensive, and it doesn't really even incorporate everything that we want to. At some point on the connection fees, we had to just say, stop adding stuff. The valves, for an example, have come up recently, and that's another cost, I think we've got to the point of a diminishing return where we've allowed things, I think we've allowed it to get to the point where if we had maintained them for, it comes down to dollars, and I think it's a direct result of not being able to sell meters over an extended period of time. I think the result of that is what we're talking about right now, because that's a key funding mechanism to be able to maintain and replace and keep your infrastructure updated. It's a key component. We've been doing it just on rates. Now, historically, if you look at our rates, we had a slight increase several years ago, and prior to that, it was a significant period of time, 18 years or so. So I think it's kind of like the perfect storm type of thing, where at some point in time, we're going to have a strategic talk, not just about our fund balance and our reserves, but maybe have a talk on where additional revenues need to come from to maintain and improve what we currently have. And a long answer, but I'm really enjoy this conversation because, we're at a crossroads right now, especially as we start talking about connections and eliminating connections and being able to generate some revenue for the district, which is really, really important. And we haven't been able to do that for an extended period of time.
That might be a good topic for another Friday night chat.
I'd like to kind of second maybe Director Rice's comments on saying that maybe it is time for us to put together a standing finance committee, which might also include some members of the public. Because as we go forward with some of these things about rates and about policies that we have a regular standing committee that's handling it.
I would agree with that.
And again, like you say, it's a topic for putting together after, because right now, this was just an ad hoc budget committee,
Right.
and technically.
Can we put that on do we need to put that on a future agenda to make a
Well, when it
standing
gets to the
committee?
future, my suggestion would be when it gets to a future agenda item, at the end of the board meeting, if you would bring that up, or if somebody wants to bring it up, and then we have 3 board members that say yes, then we can bring it back. I can work with district council and the finance director and bring it back as early as July, and kind of establish the format and the goals and the objectives of that committee, just because it's a standing committee, we really want to be able to have some goals. And then what we could do is we could work on presenting the capital improvement list and maybe some of the district's needs and current rate structure and things like that. But I think it's a great idea. I really do.
Super. Okay, Director Robinette.
Well, I'm fine for now. My light's just on.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, I would entertain a motion on
I move we adopt Resolution 21-2013, approving the CCSD budget for fiscal year 2013-2014.
I second it.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The budget is approved.
Is it appropriate to make just sort of a one post comment here? Working on this committee has been really very valuable. There is so much, of course, that we learn together, and I have forever heard these terms of how important it is that we get more staff because we need to exercise those valves. We have got to get those valves in shape. They have no exercise. Finally, I said, what does that mean? Exercise the valves. And actually it's very interesting because it is a money-saving situation. We have apparently, including known and mystery suspicious numbers of valves, maybe 9,000, I think.
900.
900.
900 to 1,000. Yeah.
Well, I'm sleeping better already because to exercise the valves, I found that we should all routinely be doing this in our personal lives as well as in our public life, and because they are essentially the turn off and turn on faucet. I call it just to turn the water on and off, because when they freeze, it does cost a lot of money, and it does create the water emergencies, and it does create the crisis. But for us at this point, the best way we can proact to that is to have the staff to get out and turn them this way. The guys make it look like they're really big valves. They don't say turn the valves. They go turn it this way, turn it that way. So you have more respect for the valves out in the field. But I think that those are good discussions that everyone really should know, that these are some of the little things that we are neglecting. And when one freezes up and you've got a crisis, then you've got a lot more money that's going to go right on down the drain, no pun intended.
Okay. Thank you for that, Director Robinette. Okay, moving to item 8B, Mr. Gruber.
Thank you, President Thompson and board members. Item 8B, public hearing to discuss and consider Resolution 22-2012 approving a fire suppression benefit assessment. In the Consumer Price Index for this time period, a CPI adjustment at the rate of 1.3 for fiscal year 2013-2014. Under fiscal impact, the adoption of the resolution increases the annual fire suppression benefit assessment revenue from approximately $5,000 for a projected total of, by $5,000 for a projected total revenue of $417,000. This fire suppression benefit assessment provides supplemental funding for the fire department operations. What we have down at the bottom of the page is just kind of a breakdown of what the cost would be. I would have reversed. I would have showed 2012 over to the left, but anyway. And this is a standard process that we bring back to the board every year. You can see for vacant lots, it's going to go up from 1769, or from 1746 to 1769. Single-family residence, With the 3,000 square foot, there's a slight increase. Again, the 3,600, a slight increase. And multifamily residence per dwelling, a slight increase. And then commercial range, again, a slight increase. So if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to ask them at this time. Chief's on vacation, but I did get a text message from him. He's back early. He's not feeling well. And then Captain Bido is out responding to calls. So I'm kind of the fire kind of guy today. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to ask.
Those vacations are dangerous.
Yeah,
aren't
that's
they?
all right.
We do have, well, I'll open the public hearing on this item, and we do have one request to speak by Jeff Walters.
Me again. How you doing? Just wanted to make a quick, short statement in consideration to the fire suppression benefit. In considering your budget for this current budget and future budgets, we just lost the Corville Ranch, and I think one of the primary, at least access to it as far as the public is concerned. And I've not been real thrilled about it because it happens to be right behind my home and we have used it for years. One of the reasons it was given for the loss of the easement by the owner was liability according to fire. And my thought was that, and discussed it with other people, one of the ways that might be able to restore the easement was to consider a public access to the ranch as far as a fire suppression liability bond for the owner possibly be created, so to reduce the liability of the owner and restore the easement. And a possible thought was to look for funding for that from, with consideration from the CTB, which was just up here today talking about funds, and you were also talking about funds being available from them. So that might be a possible bond that could also be helped as far as deferring costs from the CDB, considering it also provides a huge draw for tourism. Like I said, considering the fact that I live up there, have been queried by a number of people who would like to use the trail, who have used the trail in the past, and had to tell them that no, the trail is no longer available because it's been, I think, unfortunately cut off. And I think also the way that it was cut off was by using public funds, which I consider a essential robbery of the public trust. So that's my consideration of it. I thought that might be worth mentioning at this point in time, considering the fire suppression issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Walters. We have no other cards for public hearing, so I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for your pleasure. Any comments, questions, motions? Director Rice?
You gonna move?
None? Okay, Director Berenger?
I'll move that we adopt Resolution 22-2012, approving a fire suppression benefit assessment computer price index adjustment at the rate of 1.3% for fiscal year 2013-2014.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion is approved. Thank you much. Moving to item 8C, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Board President Thompson and board members. Item 8C is discussion and consideration to adopt Resolution 24-2013 and introduce Ordinance 04-2013, which will allow the district to utilize alternative bidding procedures in the Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act. And I'd like to allow District Council Carmel to present the staff report, if that's okay with the board.
Good afternoon, members of the board. This is your consideration of the Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act, which we'll refer to as the Act. The Act is a very flexible tool that's provided in the Public Contracts Code, and it's a tool that you can utilize if you choose to move forward with this. You don't have to utilize it, but let me explain it to you. Under the current Public Contracts Code provisions that are applicable to community services districts, which are set forth in Section 2680, the threshold for the requirement to publicly bid a project is $25,000. In other words, anything under that can be done with your own forces, or it can be just contracted out directly. Anything above that requires a fairly complex process of public bidding. Formal plans and specifications have to be prepared, and it's a pretty staff-intensive process. Under the Act, the threshold for projects that you can perform in-house is $45,000. There's an intermediate step between $45,000 and $175,000 whereby you can informally bid projects. I'll explain that in a moment. And then projects over $175,000 have to go through the same process that now you would go through for a $25,000 project. The informal bidding procedures that are set forth in the Act require you to adopt an ordinance, and under that ordinance, you'd establish lists of contractors that within each various trade. Those lists would be utilized if and when that particular trade came up in the context of a project. And what you do is simply notify them in writing that this project is up for informal bid. You don't have to prepare detailed plans and specifications, and then the informal bid process is done very informally. They write back and essentially give you a bid. So the flexibility you see in this Act, it can really come in handy at times. The downside is you have to comply with some fairly complicated accounting procedures that are established by the commission that's established under the Act, the commission in Sacramento. That would be Alan's job. Not intense. I mean, I know this is utilized throughout this county. They're not intensely difficult to understand, but there is a learning curve involved in it. I think that's the essence of it. Again, this is a tool that you can utilize if and when you want to. You don't have to utilize it. It's just something that's good to have. And frankly, the agencies that I've dealt with that have adopted the Act utilize it quite frequently just because of the flexibility involved in that middle step, this informal process. Other than that, I'd be glad to answer any questions. You have a resolution before you that will incorporate the Act and put it on our books. And then you have an ordinance that's required to be adopted as a part of this adoption of the Act that sets forth this informal bidding procedure. So it's requested that you consider the resolution and adopt it if you so desire, and then introduce that ordinance, which will come back again in July for adoption if you move forward with this. Be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions, comments? Director Berninger?
Yes, I have I understand that we must accept the lowest bid in this informal process.
No, in the informal process, well, there's a little bit of flexibility because you're not getting sealed bids back. You're essentially getting you do have to accept the lowest bid, but it's not as intense as you would see in a normal bidding process where everything is delineated on a chart and you're literally forced, assuming they are responsible and responsive, you're required to take the lowest bid. In that case, it's, under your current formula, it's a $25,000 threshold. That applies now. That would apply with the 175 and above. But again, there's a little more flexibility in the informal bid process than there is in the formal bidding process.
And how easy is it to revise these lists of accepted trades?
Well, you can, first of all, you can look around the county and borrow those that are out there, and then you can add, it's a flexible tool. You can add and subtract. If contractors come into the community that aren't on the list, they can ask to be added to the list. And then the other part of that is you're required to publish in certain trade journals. The commission controls that process and tells you where you have to publish and advertise these informal bids as well. That applies to the informal bids as well as to the formal bids, the advertising component. So again, it's not as staff intensive as a full bidding process, which can consume an awful lot of staff time. And the process of developing formal specifications for a project can be very expensive. You normally have to retain an engineer, sometimes an architect, and it's layered with costs. So this act is really an attempt to eliminate some of those costs and provide flexibility to local agencies. There really isn't a downside because you don't have to utilize the procedure. It's just there if you want it.
Thank you.
Director Clift, and then Director Arnett.
Yeah, it talks here about the employees. Can we set up the procedure by who makes these informal? Because my concern is that there's been at least one circumstances in the past that cost us a ton of money by what appeared to be informal bidding. And I don't want to go there again. And so if I have to have a very restrict formal bidding process, I'll put up with that as compared to contracts of less than 175,000 that might be serial contracts. I mean, it's not the thing itself, it's the internal controls of it that bother me right now. As to how much can we set up, or is this something that, once you do it, you're just kind of giving a carte blanche unless we step in and fire personnel?
Well, first of all, the operation of the act is delegated to your general manager. And how you choose to have him operate that is really a policy issue. He could be reporting every project to you on a case-by-case basis as it's happening, just to sort of keep it transparent, and I'd probably recommend that happen. He controls that process. So in terms of sort of serial bidding, I guess you're talking about project splitting, and that's against the law now. It's against the law under the Act. So I'm not sure I understand the nature of the question. He's the man that's going to be administering this Act.
I think.
Well,
what I'm
saying
hearing-
is, is it possible, and can we restrict his delegation of that, or does this act kind of then say, oh, well, up to this amount, they have kind of?
No, in fact, you could make all informal bids come back to the board for award. And it may be that you want to set a threshold at which that's done. It could be right at $45,000, and anything that fits within that category is going to come back for a formal board award so that you're controlling the process. It doesn't have to be administered through the general manager, and he may feel at this point in time that it's a benefit to have this process come back to you so you can get comfortable with it, so that at some point in time, I mean, I think the idea here is to eliminate the burden on the board of having every project above $25,000 come back for award, because that's how it's set up. And you may like that provision. I think the bottom line here is you can still utilize the process that's in place now, or you can choose to utilize this process. And if you choose to utilize this process, you can make the process itself subject to your approval. That's just, it's up to you.
And from a contractor's point of view, because I'm looking at it here, how often or how does a contractor, where we're talking about informal bids, how does that contractor have some knowledge that his bid or his or her bid is truly being accepted and handled? And we're not in the situation of a board of having a contractor come up here and say, yeah, but I talked to him and said this, and you're getting something else.
Well, understand the process takes place in writing. It's not an oral bidding war. Everything comes to the general manager or to the board in a form where you're going to be able to compare apples to apples. And in fact, if it doesn't come in that format, the process is to clarify from the contractor whatever portion of his bid you don't understand or is not comparable to other bids. And the operation of the process is somewhat flexible for that purpose. It's not to say you may not have a contractor come up here, just like you would in any bid protest, where someone may disagree with the manner in which you awarded the bid. But I don't think it's any more challenging to do it as an informal bid as a formal bid.
Okay.
Okay, I just have some questions here too then. This would then appear to allow for somewhat convenience that the district could have like a list of potential contractors with certain thresholds of how much the contract might be for. Would this mean that that we don't announce or publicly advertise the project so that other people could prepare a proposal if they wanted?
Again, it depends on what threshold you're talking about. Under $45,000, there's no requirement to do anything. You award it based on a contract. You perform the project in-house. That middle level requires advertisements in certain trade journals that this commission, the Uniform Public Construction Contract Act Commission, delineates and tells you what journals you have to publish in. Other than that, the lists are controlled by the entity itself. Again, anyone that wants to be added to the list simply has to ask. in order to get their name on that list. So in theory, there shouldn't be anyone excluded that wants to participate, but it's not as pervasive as is required under a formal bid process, which has very strict advertising requirements for certain time periods. And again, that would only take place under the Act at this very high threshold, over $175,000.
I guess my real concern is that whenever we are going to, essentially we're talking about hiring consultants here. We call them contractors or whatever, but we're talking about temporary, a project and bringing someone in with expertise.
No, we're not talking about consultants. Here we're talking about public works projects, which are
Okay,
very,
I
very
appreciate
strictly
that
defined.
clarification. Okay.
This doesn't apply to professional service contracts and the like.
Okay, but my question would still be the same, I guess. So it's Public Works, and they specialize in that type of work. In the process, do we have some way to have a handle on their work and other satisfied customers?
And
that
would
we
be-
know that they actually have a track record for doing it right the first time?
No more so than you do now. In other words, I think the informal process, you'll get acquainted with those that win the informal contracts, and you'll be able to track and probably have a nice book of what they do and whether they're able to perform the work in a workmanlike manner. But no more so than you do now under your current contracting provisions.
So they would give references?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
And
Thank
again, you
you.
can clarify, ask for more detail. In other words, if the response is too vague and you can't really compare it effectively with other informal bids, you simply go back to the contractor and fill in the blanks and make it comparable.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on this item? Director Rice?
Thank you. My question is just, what's the impetus for this, and how many projects a year are we going to, will this change what the trigger, I mean, is this the $25,000 to $45,000 a frequent situation? Or I'm just, because one of the things I'm concerned about is I just want to make sure that we don't end up with, we've got the people that always get the contracts, and people that would like to get into the bidding don't ever get a foot in the door.
In terms of the number of projects, that's probably a question that Jerry can answer.
Yeah, I think that we've found out historically over the last couple years or so that we've had several instances where a piece of equipment will break down, and I like what District Council Carmel said about it having a public works component of it. But that's really what this is. If we need to get a pump in here for a lift station or so hopefully it will happen less frequently than it has in the past, but it's a tool to be able to expedite the process and get us something in here that we might need in a reasonable amount of time. So how many times a year? I don't know, 4 to 6 maybe or something like that. I mean, I would, for an example, the return activated sludge pump at the wastewater plant went down. You know, it was luckily below these thresholds, but there are key components within the infrastructure that if something did happen, we would want to not have to wait to come back to the board and to be able to get that piece of equipment in a timely manner and get it replaced. So I don't unfortunately have an exact number. I'd like to say hopefully a limited amount of time. I'd like to get out of the we have to do this mode and we have to do it now. So I would assume that a limited amount of time.
But you're asking for something then that gives you some latitude, some flexibility. Sometimes certain things happen that really should be acted upon right away.
Right, and that's exactly right. When you have a critical component, a pump or a motor or something along those lines. When I know where Director Cliff was going. You know, this $175,000, well, does that mean, okay, I've ordered X and I'm going to turn back around and now it's turned into 350, so I'm going to, what's 325, or so now I'm going to order Y and now it's another 175 and I'm going to order Z, and by the time we know it, we're at $700,000, but I'm not talking about anything in particular. But I understand where you're coming from. I know exactly where you're coming from, and I have that concern. But that's not the purpose of this particular thing that we're asking for today.
Could we perhaps have
I
a
still
motion
didn't,
on
I
this?
still,
and
I
then,
still didn't hear, though, why we're having this, because this has been a problem in the past, the 25,000, why the change?
No, I'm responsible for bringing this forward. I have seen some projects that sort of fit between the 25 and the 45. I brought it forward because I have it in every agency that I represent, and it's just a nice tool to have. It's not always utilized, but it certainly comes in handy. And I think I may have misled you a little bit, Gil. It also applies to the purchase of materials. In other words, the pump example that Jerry talked about. And I think it's those instances in which it really does provide a wonderful tool in which, you don't, if it's a $28,000 piece of equipment, you don't have to go out to bid for it. You can find the cheapest one and buy it very quickly. So there's a time element as well. But I'm responsible for bringing this forward. I talked about it with Jerry, and he said, hey, that's something we'd like to see.
and perhaps we could just put a caveat with it that we be advised at the next board meeting when it has been utilized, and so we can at least have a handle on how often this is part of our process.
I don't have a problem with the concept that you're talking about of deal, but I do think that, that there ought to be some approved policy rules by the board as to how it's going to be implemented. And so I think I don't have a problem with going ahead with it as a tool that gives you the flexibility, but I don't think it's a crescent wrench that you can use for any bolt. Right. I think there's some time we ought to have some rules about when it will be applied and when it will be done and how it will be reported.
I think one of the checks and balances that we have in place that's really encouraging is the finance manager and then district council, because some of these things, a lot of these things will require contracts, and they're scrutinized by the district council, and they're looked at closely by the finance manager. So I think we have internal checks and balances in place that that hopefully the board will feel comfortable with. I also like the suggestion about advising the board as part of my general manager's report, so you don't look on the AP accounts payable and go, holy cow, somebody spent $40,000 and I don't have an idea what it was about. I don't think that's transparent at all. So I'm very receptive to that.
I tend to agree with Director Clift. I am not necessarily uncomfortable going forward with something like this, but to have this and then say we've got these informal rules that we're going to put in place, but not have any reference to what those rules might be. I'd like to suggest we do something like an ad hoc committee to put something like that together. It's not that I don't trust the general manager or the finance officer or the district council to do their job, because I do, but having these things in place is important in the long run.
I don't see it that way necessarily. Isn't it true that the general manager cannot spend more than 20? This doesn't supersede his present limits.
That's a great point. This doesn't change the requirement that the underlying contract for any project that's over $25,000 still has to come back to the board for approval. This is just the process that gets the contract to you. This won't change your purchasing policies and your current rules and regulations, which are all relative to the district.
And
this is just the process by which that contract will be determined. It ultimately gets on an agenda. Sometimes
So
it'll be a
it's a
consent
tool, it's a process, and we would still be advised through the general manager's report when it's been necessary. And that's what we're wanting, to be in the loop, but not to delay sometimes when it's needed. So given that, I would like to recommend that we adopt Resolution 24, 2013, and introduce the ordinance 042013, which will allow the district to utilize the alternative bidding procedure in the Uniform Public Construction Cost Code Accounting Act.
I'd second that.
Then moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah,
If I
I'd
could
like
just
to say that I appreciate the introduction of this, because when needed, we have to go through a 60-day issue. So bringing this up, and thank you for bringing it up, because in order to adopt this in the future, we don't have to wait that 60 or 90-day period. So thank you.
I did want to make sure that we included the actual title. There's that stale archaic rule that we have to actually read the title. So it's an ordinance of the Board of Directors of the Cambria Community Services District adding Chapter 1.06 to provide informal bidding procedures under the Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act, Section 22,000 et sec of the California Public Contracts Code.
I move.
And my second is retained.
Anything further? All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Thank you very much. Now we have item 8D, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Board President Thompson and board members. Let me go back to 8D. I got a little ahead of myself. Item 8D is discussion and consideration to confirm itemized report and consider adoption of Resolution 23-2013 to collect delinquent solid waste collection and disposal charges for the county tax roll. At the bottom of page 137, it says Mission County Disposal has requested and filed an itemized report with the CCSD to collect delinquent solid waste collections and the disposal charges for 2013-2014 tax roll. Charges outstanding total approximately $3,000. They are, since we are the government entity and they do provide solid waste pickup for our community, we're the agency that they come through. This is something that we bring back to the board every year. It's kind of standard housekeeping, but if the board approves it, then these delinquent accounts will go on the tax roll and they can receive payment that way.
Okay, this requires a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. And we have no cards on this item, so I will close the public hearing and bring it to the board for discussion. Any discussion? I'll accept a motion on this item. Don't everybody jump up at one time. Would someone like to make a motion? Director Behringer?
I will move.
Director Clift.
Do we adopt Resolution 2013, adopting the itemized report, which is Exhibit A to the resolution, describing each parcel and the amount of delinquent solid waste collection and disposal charges to be collected.
I'll second it.
Okay, Director Behringer indicated that he may have an issue with this, so any discussion?
I don't know if this is in our agreement, in our agreement with the waste management. If it's, I would think they should be able to do this. One time I voted for it, and the next time I voted against it, and I'm kind of against it, but that's just my personal opinion.
Okay.
I'm surprised there's only 13 accounts now.
District Clerk, would you call the roll on this item?
Director Clift,
Yes.
Director Robinette,
Yes.
Director Behringer,
No.
Director Rice,
Yes.
and President Thompson.
Yes.
And motion carried 4-1.
Thank you. That item is approved. Moving to item 9A, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, President Thompson, board members. Item 9A is consideration of numerical or percentage limit related.
Mr. Gruber, we have a
Request?
point of personal privilege
Okay.
for a break. So let's take 10 minutes before we get to this item. could repeat your commentary on item 9A. We'll take that under consideration.
Thank you, President Thompson, board members. 9A is consideration of a numerical or percentage limit related to amendments to the San Luis Obispo County Growth Management Ordinance. I'll turn this over to District Council Tim Carmel. Thank you.
I thought Board Member Cliff was going to give the report. Just kidding. What was that? The county's growth management ordinance establishes the maximum number of building permit allocations that the county will issue annually. It's currently set at 0 through 2015. In March, the board adopted Resolution 0913, providing for the interim issuance of intent to serve letters based on total demand offset of water use pursuant to Condition 4B of the county's North Coast Area Plan. The county's asked the district determine the maximum number or percentage of allocations it wants to be included in the growth management ordinance amendment. Each percentage equals 38 connections on new dwelling units. It's requested that the board discuss and determine the maximum number or percentage of dwelling unit allocations it wants the county to include in the growth management ordinance amendment. Be glad to answer any questions.
Before we go there, we have a couple requests to speak under public comment. First one is Jim Webb. Mr. Webb, if you would.
Good afternoon, Board. My name's Jim Webb, and I did want to comment on 9A. I think that there's a lack of clarity sometimes in some of the terms we use, having to do with EDUs, connections, units, and would just like to make that point specifically when it comes to setting a numerical or percentage limit on intent to serve letters, for example, that the board's going to issue. And I'll just bring up the example of Kingston Bay project that's before you. There's one intent to serve letter that would be issued for that project, which would represent 11.78 EDUs, and would further represent 31 units, or a total of 41 beds in the facility. When we look at people's self-help housing, again, one intent to serve letter would be issued, but it would represent 40 EDUs and upwards of 40 units, which would be apartments, 1 to 3 bedroom apartments. From my perspective, I believe in conservation. I think that the jury's in as far as whether it really does save water or doesn't. I think it does, based on the Fryer report and based on the Medaus information that they provided. And so I think that it will create over time a surplus of water, which the district is free to oversee and perhaps hand out through new connections. However, I think that specifying the number of intent to serve letters or permits or the percent misses one essential point, and that is that the fundamental goal is to have no net increase in water use, whether it's 38 intent to serve letters or it's 200. It doesn't matter so much as it matters how much water is being withdrawn from our local aquifers. So I would just encourage the board to make a statement to that regard, that our policy is that there should be no net increase in withdrawals from our local creeks. That being said, if you have to choose a number, and that seems to be the business before you, personally I would say that the 0.5% figure is more reasonable in light of the fact that conservation benefits have yet to be demonstrated or ground truthed here in Cambria. Although we see it occurs elsewhere, and believe it'll, rightfully so, I think that it'll occur here. we don't have the verification that it has in fact happened yet. And so in that sense, the check's kind of in the mail, you know, we think it's coming, but what you're talking about here is going ahead and spending some of those savings without actually getting the check yet. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Webb. Next, we have Mary Webb.
Thank you, Board. Mary Webb, you know, I did write this 11-page document for your June 21st meeting and couldn't make the meeting. And there are questions I've had in there that I've had, you know, for years that still have never been answered, and that is the whole confusion between connections, between numbers of connections, differences in reports about how many water connections we actually have, what really is a dwelling unit, how and like Jim just said, an intent to serve can actually include 40 meters. One intent to serve could develop 80 acres of land on Main Street right now. So there is no way we could really even be discussing this, as far as I'm concerned, without talking about actual gallons of water. We're just tossing around percentages as if they don't mean anything. And they mean water. This means water to this community. And it's on top of that, it means water for the coastal resources, water for the creek. Their Coastal Commission has written, you know, there have been already all these different, you know, appeals that have legal language in them about what you have to do before you can grow. And we are just not meeting any of those conditions. We have not met, I don't think, any of the conditions. We're on our way to doing conservation finally, after 13 years of talking about it. We actually are putting money towards it. We're on our way maybe to doing build-out reduction, but that's a plan, like I said, without funding. It hasn't been implemented. I just don't see how we could even be going to moving the growth or management ordinance at all. 0.5 is out of the question for me. It's 0 until we can prove what's going on. We've already issued now, this last year, another 40 units of water that we had not planned for affordable housing. So, you know, if anything, I think Elizabeth Bettenhausen said at one point that should be a pilot project. And if that ever even gets approved, maybe it should be a pilot project, because that is 40 actual units with, you know, 2 to 3 to 5 people living in each unit. It could be another, you know, what, 40, 80, you know, 300 people right there with affordable housing. So I'm for 0%. I just don't see how we can do it, because this is all theoretical. This is all a program that is not proven. There's no verification of gallons used. There's no verification of water that we're saving. I would bring up further, Cambria Pines Lodge was supposed to save something like 700,000 gallons in order for them to expand in 2003. They were supposed to offset their increased water use by offsetting water use at 2 different hotels, at Pelican Suites and another one. Have they done that? Anybody know? Has that water actually been, who actually oversees that to see if water savings actually did occur in 2003 with the Cambria Pines Lodge expansion? Have we added 124 connections in the moratorium, or have we added more? All of my records show we've added more than 124, and I think we've added way more than 202 EDUs that we were allowed in 2001. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. And I did receive your email on that, but I wasn't able to open it. I don't know if you have I'm not a computer whiz, but if you could get it to Kathy, maybe she can give me a hard copy or something. Or great, thank you. And then we have Jeff Heilman.
Hi. Jim and Mary Webb just said it all. I can't add anything to it. I want to say that I know this. I've been evoking a little bit of contention here. I want to say that this is not an issue of integrity or anything like that. It's an issue of priorities, and I think the priority ought to be conservation oriented and not, you know, gung ho on helping the 2 big, massive, lucrative real estate corporations that are going to be first in line to get these meters. And within the group of people that are on the waiting list, there are a lot of speculators. I think that your consideration ought to be given first and foremost to the people that already reside here and do need the water. So again, what Jim and Mary said, take it into consideration. You seem to be making a decision without clarity on what you're actually really getting yourself involved in here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heilman. That concludes our public comment on the issue. I'll bring it back to the board for discussion. Director Rice, then Director Clift.
The first thing I'd like to say is we're kind of being given a false choice in terms of we have to pick a percentage. It's my understanding, and I think this has been one of the issues that's been muddied over the years, that the district is responsible for issuing intent to serve letters based on our resources. The county can then determine that the county separately determines whether or not they think we have the resources to accommodate the additional building, and they determine based on their review of our resources, which includes the streets and the schools and the water and the wastewater, pretty much everything that is involved in the infrastructure. So the county then sets the amount based on their review of those resources. We issue intent to serve letters based on our understanding and evaluation of our water and wastewater and the ability to provide water and wastewater services. So the fact that we have to pick a percent for the county is a little bit, that's kind of not our job. We don't want them to be telling us whether we can issue intent to serve letters. We don't want to tell them what they think that the resources are that are available for the community to build. I personally am not comfortable telling them what we think it should be. We clearly think that the building should be allowed, or we wouldn't issue intent to serve letters. We clearly think there's enough water and wastewater capacity, or we wouldn't issue intent to serve letters. So I'm kind of against picking any percentage at all. I think that's their job, and they should do it, and we shouldn't be muddling into their job. Just my personal thought on that.
All right. Director Clift and Director Berenger.
Philosophically, I don't disagree with you on that point, but the powers to be there will simply drag us around the bureaucratic rat hole if we don't at least express something. And I think it's also appropriate that we might express what we believe is available within within our resources. I do not favor a percentage, and the reason I don't favor a percentage is that there's this discussion about how many connections, not connections. You used the term 38. I've heard the term there's 4,200 connections, and so is that 42? Is that 38? And we get off into that game of give me another study to show me exactly why it's 38 rather than 39. And so I would simply recommend that we state that for this first year, because we still are working on the conservation and things, that we are prepared to issue up to 20 intent to serve letters for single-family residences, because that would prevent us from issuing one intent to serve letter for a commercial project, and say that we would issue up to 20 intent to serve letters if we meet the requirements of the condition 4B of the local area plan that says we have adequate water and such. So we're limited, first of all, by what we can conserve, and then second, be limited by the 20. And then it's not an argument over is 1% of this or 1% of that or 0.5% of this or 0.5%. It's 20. Everybody knows where we're going, and we don't have an argument. Or it's 40. I'm using 20 because I still believe that we should be very conservative and start small.
May I?
Director Berenger, then Director Robb.
I agree, and I believe that the reason it's stated in this 0.5% and 1% is because the staff had to come up with something.
Yeah.
And I agree wholeheartedly with Ms. Rice's thing that says we shouldn't tell the county what to do, and we're just saying we're doing an unlimited number. I like the idea of 20. I think the first year, less than 20 or less, I think is the way, because we can do just one. I like the idea of single-family residences, except that we aren't tickling the commercial or the multifamily list at all. And by not even tickling them, we have no intent, no understanding as to what the demand might be for a commercial meter or what the demand might be for a multifamily meter, so we aren't giving them an opportunity. So I don't know what the semantics might be, but we will issue up to 20 connections of a sized for a single-family residence. That might give us a little more flexibility, because I really do want to understand where these commercial and multifamily.
We also have the limit of 20% that we have to keep for visitor serving.
Visitor serving, and and again, as our discussion last Friday, I'm not sure where we are, but it gives us a little bit more flexibility. So rather than specifically saying, from a semantic perspective, single-family residences, if we size them for projects of a size of a single-family residence, I'd feel more comfortable.
Well, you could say 20 intent to serve letters that use no more than 20 EDUs of water.
Well, 20
Single-family equivalent dwelling
right,
units.
60 EDUs. Right.
No,
Per billing period, because that's what we're, or whatever, anyway.
Well,
Director Robinette, please.
Thank you. I certainly agree with what everyone has said today, but I do think that what's before us is to address the wait list of the single-family residents at this time. And you said something, Mr. Carmel, that I thought was very interesting. I believe I heard you say the county is requesting us to set a percent or a number. I heard the word or a number. Is that correct?
That's correct. Well, that's how
Thank you.
we're interpreting it for the reasons articulated by Board Member Cliff.
Well, I think in fact that is, from what I understand, I believe that can be done, as a matter of fact. And it gets us away from the percent. It gets us to choosing perhaps around, equated to a 0.5%, about like a number of 20 intent to serve letters. But it also gives us the flexibility to evaluate and to be very conservative as we go forward on this, so that when we come back next year for this conversation again, we're not again confronted with a GMO and a percent and having to go through the county and get all that changed again, when in fact we're selecting based on our first year as truly a pilot that we will evaluate and reassess at the end of the day. And then we can come back with perhaps the same number, slightly less, slightly more. And on the issue of commercial development and other, I want us to be very much open to that, for sure. But I think when we have a taker or a customer or a project coming, we have a couple sitting out, well, actually we have several sitting out there right now. We do have the Kingston Bay, we do have the Brambles, we do have some others going on. So I'm not closed in any way to commercial needs or a wait list, but I believe it's a much smaller number, and I would like to just keep this category kind of moving forward where we are.
Thank you. Mr. Cliff, did you?
Yeah, I was asking the question of staff, is it, or council, is it possible to couch that number in terms of 20 single-family equivalent dwelling units?
That's how we will articulate it that way, just as you've articulated it.
And then that way, if someone came to us and said, I have a commercial project and I need two intent to serve, two EDUs, we would consider that the equivalent of 2 intent to serve letters.
That's how we will present it to the county. And I would note, because the process may take a while, certainly knowing the county, it will take a while. You may want to consider, and looking at the language in the growth management ordinance, you may want to consider the period from July 1st, 2013 through June 30th, 2015, a 2-year period. You'd hate to have to go back into the process.
I understand that, but I almost have a kind of a sadistic desire to change the number every year just to mess up their growth management ordinance.
Well, I think the problem with that is they'll make us go back into the process next
Right,
year.
I know that, and that's probably wrong, but right now they're using through 2015 for us, so your recommendation might be to say a particular number for that period of time.
Well, per fiscal year, if 20 is your number and you're comfortable with it, up to 20 per fiscal year is language that fits nicely into their code.
Yeah.
And then by then, the growth management ordinance will be revisited.
Then
Yeah,
in
I don't
2015.
have a problem with that, and by then, we might be well along the way on an alternative water supply.
And if I might just point out, in this month's expenditure reports, just counting up from this month's expenditure reports, there were 13 washing machine retrofits done that we gave rebates for.
Yeah.
And according to the Madhouse study, that's 4.8 units per year for each washing machine. That comes to 62.4 units for the year, which is plenty for 5 places. So I think that if we are doing things like monitoring those places where we've got the retrofits of the washing machines and can show that we've got that we are actually conserving that much water, because that's something that would show the amount of water that you save from a shower head, while significant, still might not show on your bill since a unit is 748 gallons. But I'd be more comfortable saying 10 if we're going to do 2 years, because not having the ability to go back in if we don't find that we're actually having a net zero kind of worries me.
Yeah, well, I understand your worry, and I sympathize with that, but we're saying up to.
Right.
And I think that every member of this board wants to start slow. We know this is going to be a long process. It'll be 3 years before anybody even has a permit in
Yeah,
hand.
so it's up to based on the savings. If we can't show the savings, we can't go.
And let me say too, just let me weigh in, that my concern, my priority is dealing with the single-family residences that are on the water wait list at this point, before we get into any more multifamily or any more commercial. I'm moved by the letter that we received here from James and Judith Spencer, who indicated that we have now waited more than 10 years. Our position number is 32, and we're committed to proceed at the earliest possible time and have no intention to defer. Now these are not speculators. These are real human beings that are looking to move into our community. And then they conclude by saying, at age 71, though, time is beginning to run out of me. So I guess,
Time flies.
Time flies. So
And
that's the kind of person that I'm interested in seeing.
If I could also just add to that, I think, again, we always have some good conversation that kind of expands beyond the more focused thing before us. But I absolutely think in the future we have to have a couple of things. We've got to come to a standard discussion and unit of measure, and I do believe, as I said last time, and others have said, we need things equated to gallon usage, and it could go from there to monthly usage to equate to a percentage of an acre foot, because an acre foot's the bottom line to what happens with our water use. And I also agree, too, that we should never be calling an intent to serve letter to find that it has like 30 EDUs. So somewhere we've got to have more of a consistent, again, understanding of how could one intent to serve letter over here mean this, and over here it means something much more significant. So those are, I think, the ways we grow together here, and I appreciate it, so thank you.
Yeah, I just want to comment that Mary Webb's email, I was able to open it after a period of time, was excellent. I think it really showed the light on the issue, better than I've seen in a long time. And Jim, Mr. Webb's comment just a little while ago about, hey, what are we talking about, gallons or, and I agree. However, by next month, we probably don't have that. But when we make a determination on when to issue a letter, we should try and be as specific as possible of what the intent of that letter is, for that single-family home, the type of savings we're trying to offset in a gallons perspective, perhaps. That's the thought.
And we're having good discussion about evidence. I continue to hear that, and I couldn't agree more. We want real evidence. I think the best we can do, given where we are, because we can't roll it forward and look into the future till we're there, but I think what gives us more comfort in that regard is we do have some things. We do have some people taking the washing machines. We do have some people taking advantage of the incentives that are real. We do have also a very interesting one, because the most aggressive retrofit, of course, here in our community is on sale of home. And that is using now the 2010 Green State Required Building Code. And those are beginning to give us real data now, if we can find apples to apples. You have to be very careful, of course. So it's not that I think, again, we don't want to have as much hard data, but to make this a pilot and be able to measure as we go. And again, we know we're not going to have anyone turning on any water from any construction here for, I would tell you, probably a good 3 years. But once we do, we want to then say, okay, so how is this working? And then that's the one we can't quite know, but at least we can look at comparing homes that have sold recently, and if they have like situations, they're owner-occupied, they're still owner-occupied, that gives us something. The retrofits gives us something from voluntary retrofits, and some of the things that have happened here, like the laundromat already. So we're not ignoring that. It's tough to get your arms around it, that's for sure.
I'd just like to make one more plea for doing something that sets in writing in our policies that we will reserve a certain amount for visitor serving uses. And I fully appreciate that we need to be serving these folks that have been on this waiting list for a really long time. I'm not saying that we should have commercial go ahead of them. I'm saying we need to just make sure, because we are going to run up against that, because this will go to the Coastal Commission, and we need to make sure that we're ready with an answer of how we're going to assure that 20% of our resources are going to be saved for visitors serving purposes. That's all I'm saying.
I agree with that point. I think that we can take a look at how much, we have to define what is the tourism or the business use. And so we have to see, well then what does that equate to what? An acre foot. 20% of where we are, is it being used by, by tourism? We can do that.
Does our council have some language that, I've been watching you writing over there, and I always...
I do, but when you're ready to have it thrown at you, I'd be glad to.
I think we're ready for some language.
So we'll request up to 20 single-family residential dwelling unit allocations, excuse me, per fiscal year for the period from July 1st, 2013 through June 30th, 2015.
How does that take into account Director Rice's concern about commercial?
The allocation for commercials based on the overall ratio community-wide, and as I understand it, we're well above the 20%. In other words, it's not based on an every year you have to allocate 20% for commercial and 80% for residential. It's an overall ratio within the community. And according to administrative staff, we're way above the 20%, but we can bring that information back.
I think that needs to be proven. Like I mentioned last Friday, the commercial is over 20%, but there's churches and schools and other things in that commercial allocation. If we can verify the fact that we have 20% or more, I'm happy, but I think it's a number we should have in our back pocket that's studied. And staff also puts vacation rentals in there, and if you put vacation rentals in there, you're in there. But every vacation rental takes away a dwelling unit, and we got to take a look at that balance, and if it's there, it's there.
And I think part of the problem is going to be how these terms are defined, because they're not. So there is going to be some interpretive issues associated with it. We can defer this. I would recommend that you don't defer it, but we can defer it till next month, bring the matter back, and have you kick that around.
Can I just ask, you said that the CCSD would be requesting an allocation? Is that what you said? Did you say?
The county's requested that we identify specific numbers, so.
Right, so what did you just say you just read something?
I said.
Could you read that again?
This is what we'll request from the county. We will
Okay.
request up to 20 single-family residential dwelling unit allocations per fiscal year for the period from July 1st, 2013 through June 30th, 2015.
Okay,
Per fiscal year.
that seems like the CCSD is requesting building allocations.
Yeah, I don't want to request. I would say that it has been determined by the board that we are going to issue this many if they wanted to know, in case they wanted to know.
They do. We'll utilize language that indicates we as a district are not requesting the allocations. We're requesting them to accommodate single-family residences on the wait list.
We're requesting them to expect to accommodate.
Right, we're going to be issuing a certain number of intent to serve letters, and we're not requesting any allocations. I mean, we would like them to give as many allocations as intent to serve letters as we're going to give, but.
We'll make sure that the language is consistent with the code as it sits now.
I understand the point, and I would probably argue that very strongly, but at the same time, in our data, in our stuff that we reviewed the other day, it was very clearly that we don't care what they do ultimately. And so it might be respectful to request that our request is for them to change their ordinance to this amount. But we're going to, but in what we may approve, or what is being presented to us in July, has wordings that say it don't matter what you do.
Well, and I'm loath to offer language in the format of their code because it's their business how they choose to present the language.
Right.
If you want to see how it fits into the code now, it would read, the maximum annual allocation shall be set at up to 20 single-family residential dwelling unit allocations per fiscal year for the period from July 1st, 2013 through June 30th.
Now,
that's the language that's in the.
That might be a compromise.
I think that's a good way to go.
Oh, that we're requesting that they change?
That they change their wordage to this.
Yeah, that's the specific wording.
Okay.
In the
As
code
that
now.
would be helpful as we do it. In other words, it would be helpful if they did that. We suggest that that's what they do.
Right, this is what we would like.
That's a nice suggestion, because they're saying how much, give us a number. We're not going to give them a percentage, we're going to give them a number, and the number is up to 20.
Right.
So that if they determine that that's minimum, and they would like to accommodate that through their code, that would be wonderful.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
I move that, what he said.
Okay.
Up to 20 in the language that conforms to the code of the county. And I like the idea, he put something in there about single-family residential units. I think that
It's
that's.
been moved and seconded, and Director Clift.
Take your pick.
I'll second.
Okay. Director Robinette. Mr. Carmel, would you like to read that motion then, so that everyone has a clear understanding?
Certainly. The language we'll suggest is that the maximum annual allocation shall be set at up to 20 single-family residential dwelling unit allocations per fiscal year for the period from July 1st, 2013 through June 30th, 2015.
Okay, I would suggest that you could probably strike the word maximum, because it says up to.
The maximum annual allocation is actually a term of art.
Oh, it's their.
It's their
okay,
term.
It's their term, okay.
It's their
so fine.
term.
Okay.
All right, all right. I'm comfortable
Any
with that.
further discussion on this issue? All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion is approved. Thank you much. Moving to item 9B, Mr. Gruber.
Thank you, President Thompson, board members. Item 9B is consider approval of paramedic service provider agreement and advanced life support ALS agency designation with the San Luis Obispo County EMS. We do have a fiscal impact here, and it talks about what this will cost the district relating to equipment and training. But I think more importantly, there's a caveat here that says it's also probable that paramedic pay could become an issue for eligible IAFF members, which is negotiable, and for qualifying paramedic reservists. The cost for additional members, which is negotiable, and for the cost for additional pay for fire department compensation is yet to be determined. However, an extended period of time, in addition to PERS employee contribution going up considerably in the next several years, it could have a significant financial impact on the department and the CCSD. I just wanted to disclose that. And just briefly under discussion, the CCSD Board of Directors voted unanimously on May 27, 2010, to support the efforts of the CCSD Fire Department to seek ALS designation non-transporting within the San Luis Obispo County as part of an ongoing effort between the CCSD Fire Department and the Cambria Community Healthcare District. The CCSD Board of Directors drafted a letter in support to further the efforts of improving the level of emergency service within the community. On May 23, 2013, Steve Liverman, the Director of Emergency Medical Services Division of the San Luis Obispo County Public Health Department, transmitted an attached paramedic service provider agreement, which upon approval will provide the ALS designation to the fire department. The agreement is necessary to comply with 22 Cal Code Regulations Section 100168, which requires a provider of ALS enter into a written agreement with their local EMS agency. Prior to the slow EMS approval, the CCSD and the CCHD have partnered together via an amendment to the mutual aid agreement to the CCSD FD to provide ALS service with the qualified paramedic personnel. Now let's go back on and a little bit more about what's going on, but also this would require that we do have a paramedic on the engine, and Mark did indicate that here in the staff report, that if we do move forward with this, a paramedic will be required to, the paramedic pay could, well, it says a paramedic will be required to be on the engine at all times. So with that, I'll answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay, just one comment. I think from the fire chief's report earlier today, it was obvious that the great majority of calls for service from the fire department are medical calls. And I think what also is evident is that, in particular, Lodge Hill, is that the first vehicle on the scene is pretty much always the fire truck. I mean, it's because of geographical location, whatever. And I think that if I were to make a call from Lodge Hill, I would want the first responder on this team on the scene to be someone with ALS certification. And so I think this, to me, it's a no-brainer. I think it's important that we have this service with our fire department.
I would also agree that it's probably a no-brainer to approve it. I think we're going to have to do some follow-up coordination, because with us as an ALS servicer and us as a paramedic on the engine, and the engine gets there first, and that paramedic, the situation now is that paramedic can go to work, but they tend to step back when the ambulance gets there. And I don't want to see a fight in a bedroom over who's the paramedic in control of this case. And if I think we're going to still have to take a look at that memorandum of understanding and work out who's the responsibilities along the way, because we might run ourselves into some problems where a paramedic on the engine is saying, "This is my patient, and all you're going to do is transport when I get finished here," and we could get ourselves into some problems. So I think we should do it, because it puts a tool in the box, but I think that we still have to do some work in terms of making sure we have the procedure correctly, how it's going to come down, how it's going to cooperate.
It sounds like that's a very important distinction and clarification, to know actually who's in charge, or does someone take over, don't they take over, for the good of the patient. And I took CPR training here not too long ago, and CERT had offered, we're working with one of the people that's a paramedic here in town, And so the training was through this individual. And when I look back on that training, I'm not sure that there wasn't an understanding of some definite hierarchy between the paramedic and then the person from the fire department. So I think it needs to be clarified so whatever's going on, the service to the patient is seamless.
Yeah, you know, my concern is like at Los Osos, the paramedics are on the fire engine from Los Osos. CAL FIRE has paramedics on their engines, and they're the first responder in almost all cases, and those paramedics handle the situation. San Luis Ambulance is responding. San Luis Ambulance also has a paramedic on board, but the case is handled by the CAL FIRE paramedic and then turned over to San Luis Ambulance for transport. And I just would hate to see, our guys are too close to each other and working too much to deal that we don't get a good understanding of how we're going to deal with it, so that we don't get guys or gals saying, hey, this is my patient.
Somebody please start, yes.
I agree with Mr. Cliff, but not necessarily that it's a no-brainer. You know, in a way, safety is a no-brainer, but one of the issues is we're now taking on additional responsibilities. We're not getting paid for it. The healthcare district has their funding, we have our funding. All of a sudden, we're picking up a 365-day-a-year obligation with no funding. So when it comes to a JPA or whatever, we should use this as a point of contention. I also haven't been involved in a lot of the ad hoc stuff that's been going on, but my suggestion is that we might be doing this free now, but some of the funding that's coming should be coming that way. I also think it's a huge problem, like you said, as far as who's going to respond first. And maybe when the JPA is finalized, or if there is a joint agreement, the ambulance service becomes more of a transport service than it is a first responder, because we'll probably respond well. I also don't want to take on the financial responsibility of this at the moment, other than without a clear benefit. But I think the clear benefit is that when the ambulance service is gone and it goes to Monterey County, we're now going to have a fire truck. Well, it's like we have an extra ambulance in town. And very seldom are both gone, but sometime it will happen, and then we're going to have a fully qualified paramedic. So we are going to benefit there. But I don't think it's a no-brainer. I think we should think about it. As far as this act, I'm voting for it, and I support it.
Director Rice?
This seems like one more step of us taking over basically almost everything that the CCHD does. And I mean, I'm not sure how they feel about it, because I haven't had a chance to ask them, but we've been approved now, and they know we've been approved, right?
Yes, and they participated in and recommended the approval.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just don't know if somebody could just fill me in.
And in fact, it was necessary for them to recommend it to county medical before county medical would do it.
Is there
And most of the same people
No,
are involved.
there's not a
Right.
LAFCO involvement at this point in time.
Because is it a duty that we can assume?
Yes.
Okay.
See, if there's a qualified paramedic, currently, if there's a qualified paramedic on an engine, because like I said, the reservists are oftentimes dual qualified. Currently, if that person is on the engine and that person gets to a scene with the fire department, that person cannot provide paramedic services, even though he's a trained paramedic.
Okay, so the other district is okay with what?
Yes.
As long as that, I mean, clearly it gives better service, if not overdone service.
And the issue of increased costs beyond supplies, because right now, supplies are provided by a healthcare district for when there is a paramedic. They replenish it, but I think you're replying here to the fact that we now have our own supplies on board all the time, so there is some supply costs. The question about extra duty and extra pay is a negotiated matter that we're going to have to deal with down the road. It's a separate issue. And as to us taking them over, I mean, theoretically, by doing this, they could take us over, or take over the fire. You know, I mean.
I'm just trying to make sure we
Yeah,
have some orderly disposition of services type of thing, you know, you want to make sure that I want to know that I want to know if I'm in trouble, that there's going to be somebody come and help me.
Ultimately, hopefully, it works out as a very cooperative arrangement under one command somewhere, so that resources are used to the best of the ability.
Thank you for that clarification, that helps a lot.
And quite frankly, from a personal perspective, when I needed an ambulance at my home, and the first person that came through the door was a fireman who I know is a paramedic, you don't think I'm not going to expect
Indeed, thank you.
service from that person?
And did he?
And they did.
What, just a question, why is it that our fire truck is always first and then the ambulance?
Closer, usually.
Closer.
Their location is optimal, yeah, they're right there in town.
Typically, it's closer,
And
yeah.
closer to
I've
Highway
asked this
1.
before, but it's still, I thought, you
But
know.
they're mostly there first, they arrive first on scene. Well,
Unless it's downtown.
yeah, unless it's downtown, and then it's usually the healthcare district.
Can I move that we approve the service?
Absolutely.
We approve paramedic service provided agreement and advanced life support ALS agency designation with San Luis Obispo County EMSA.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Other discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
That is approved. Thank you. Now we get to the real meat of the agenda.
I'm going to recuse myself on this item.
Okay, we have item 9C. Mr. General Manager?
9C, this is cast ballot for the California Special District Association, the CSDA Board of Directors, election 2013, Region 4, Seat B. Recommendation is recommended the Board of Directors vote for one of the nominees for the CCSD Board of Directors, Region 4, Seat B. There 5 individuals have been nominated to fill the CCSD Board of Directors, CSDA, it's Freudian slip, sorry about that. CSDA Board of Directors election for 2013, Region 4, Seat B. The term would expire in December of 2017, and the nominees are as followed.
Before you read those, I have a conflict of interest, so I'm going to step out. Thank you.
Okay, but I'm not going to read them. They're right here. You have Tim Ruse, East Nile Community Services District, Greg Baltimore, the Los Osos Community Services District, Robert Blair, Homo Community Services District, Felma Hurdle, Oceano Community Services District, and our Director, Amanda Rice, Cambria Community Service District. Each independent special district may vote for one nominee. The completed ballot is to be returned to the CSDA office no later than Friday, August 2nd, 2013 at 5 p.m. A copy of the ballot is attached with information about the candidates who have submitted his or her candidate statement to the CSDA. Thank you,
Any
Board.
discussion or a motion?
Go ahead.
I move that we support Amanda Rice on the CSDA Board of Directors election 13 after having reviewed the material very thoroughly.
I second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion is approved.
I'll go get Amanda, okay? Would you introduce 9D, please?
I don't think you have to.
Merle,
There she goes,
Merle's
okay.
going to bed.
It was close, Amanda, but you won. Okay. Item 9D.
Thank you, Board President and board members. 9D is consideration adoption of Resolution 28-2013 for the election of directors to the Special District Risk Management Authority Board of Directors.
Mr. President, because the Special District Risk Management Authority does provide a compensation stipend, it's necessary for me to recluse myself on this issue.
Okay.
And the recommendation is to adopt Resolution 28-2013, selecting candidates to serve as the director of the Board of Directors for the Special District Risk Management Association, Management Authority, rather. And information's in front of you.
I would,
I think
are we going to do 4?
Well, we have Merle Clift, we have Mike Schaefer,
But I
John
mean, are we
Woolley.
going to pick 4?
Up to 4.
Up to
Yeah,
4.
So it's
So
basically,
that's the first thing.
And
What you could do is,
I did,
go ahead. Go ahead.
sorry,
No.
I was curious, so I actually had a conversation and, with Director Clift about what all of this was, because the SDRMA board, he's done such a good job on this board. I definitely think that voting for him and the incumbents is the way to go. Whether on picking a 4th one of the considerations would be trying to make sure that different areas of the state are all well represented. So picking a whole bunch of people from Southern California, we might want to pick somebody from Northern California for the other person, just so that they're well distributed. But as far as, he didn't want to make any recommendations in particular, but just to say that trying to have, trying to have representation that covers all regions of the state is one thing they do strive for.
Right.
I'm looking over these people's applications. I think that it's not a bad idea to look at Mike Schaefer, because he's got experience in the insurance industry, just like Director Clift does. If we wanted to have somebody from Northern California, Dennis Mayo is McKinleyville, and that is one of the only other ones that would be Northern California.
Okay, I'd like to weigh in a little bit. I do understand that Mr. Clift he's from the insurance industry. He's done very well on this board, and I definitely would support his candidacy. And also, it is my understanding that the incumbents have done a good job, and there is no recommendation by our representative to say that the other incumbents wouldn't be excellent also representatives. However, since I have no strong feeling toward any of the other candidates, and I did do a brief review of this, I think it's certainly within our right just to vote for 3 persons only. You don't have to vote for all 4 people. And it would be my recommendation that we vote for the incumbents and let those that have campaigned or get strong recommendations from other people that may know these individuals would be the best service we could give to those candidates, rather than just picking somebody from, just because, yes, you strive to have something geographically associated, but I think that we could vote for 3, and I'd be comfortable following the lead of others, if you'd like.
or we could only vote for the one we really know and let the chips fall
Well,
where they
I
may.
had a training from David Aranda, and I think I would wholeheartedly, without question, say that individual he's an incumbent, and he knows his stuff, and he is very good for special districts and for SDRMA. I would say without reservation. I can't speak to anybody else on the list except that I know that 2 of these people are held in high regard, and I think that I would move that we vote for Merle, Mike Schaefer, Jean Bracy, and David Aranda for our 4 choices. And you can either second or however you want to do.
And your recommendation for Mike Schaefer is because of geography or personal knowledge?
Knowledge based on his application, his background and his application.
Okay, let's let Director Robidette weigh in, and then we'll see if we have a second on the motion.
Thank you. The logic of what everyone has said makes sense. Certainly Merle goes without question. And the other incumbent, again, I tend to lean that way. I also have had training with this individual, and he certainly knows and has good experience. I see the logic to some of the northern and southern kind of geographical representation, but I'm not as much thinking that it's harder to know. Of course, we do have another incumbent here, too. So that's kind of an interesting thing. We have actually 3 incumbents. And so then you have 2 people essentially from sort of central California. And then you have us here on the coast. So maybe we should try to balance it out geographically in the end.
Well, the reason I say Mike Schaefer is because he has experience both with CSDs and with city councils and Parks and Rec. In addition to his experience in the insurance industry, I believe that he would provide a good ongoing benefit with the education, which the CSDA has partnered with the SDRMA to provide the board education programs that are currently offered, and I think that he could offer a good balance to the rest of the candidates on that front.
Okay, Director Rice, you have your motion on the table. Do I hear a second on the motion to the table to?
Can you read that again?
That's Merle.
Voting for Merle, Mike Schaefer, Jean Bracy, incumbent, and David Aranda, incumbent.
I second that.
Okay, that motion has been moved and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion is approved. Thank you. And with that,
Future agenda
I
items?
don't know if Merle
Merle.
went. Oh, he was
Merle's back.
listening at the door, I think. With that, we have completed our agenda, and so with that, we are,
We were going to have a future agenda
oh,
item?
Future agenda items, ad hoc, not non-ad hoc, standing committee for finance.
Did you want the water modeling to come back as well?
The what?
The water model?
The modeling?
The modeling?
No, that was just
I think we were thinking maybe at one of the next study sessions.
study
yeah?
sessions, yeah.
Do we have a study session set for July or no? Okay. All right.
we have some pretty major items coming up in July that we already have set for the agenda, so it'll be pretty busy. But that certainly would be the good basis for one. All right, with that, we have, anybody else with future agenda items? With that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.